Hi guys, tonight we step very quietly into a world before cities, before farms, before written names, and before anyone could look up at the stars and call the earth lonely. The night is cold. A small fire crackles in front of a shelter made from branches, hides, and careful hands. Smoke drifts upward into a dark sky where no electric light softens the stars. You can hear distant animals moving beyond the trees, the soft breathing of sleeping people nearby, and the faint scrape of stone against stone beside the embers. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here, and while you settle in. Tell me where you are watching from, and what your local time is right now. Maybe it is midnight, maybe it is early morning, maybe the room around you is quiet enough to feel ancient. Now, dim the lights, and let yourself arrive beside this old fire. You are not standing in a museum, not yet. There are no glass cases, no labels, no neat timeline printed on a wall. You are in the deep past itself, where history is not written down but breathed into cold air, pressed into mud, shaped into tools, and carried in the bones of people who do not know they will one day become evidence. The world around you is older than civilization, but not empty. That is the first thing to understand, long before temples, kings, roads, and maps. The earth was already full of human stories. Some belong to people like you, Homo sapiens. Some belong to other humans, close relatives, neighbors of a kind, sharing the same forests, rivers, caves, and dangerous weather. A mainstream historical fact is that Homo sapiens were not the only human species on Earth for much of prehistory. Neanderthals lived across parts of Europe and Western Asia for hundreds of thousands of years, and Denisovans, still mysterious, left traces mostly through ancient DNA. There were also smaller island humans, like Homo floresiensis, and perhaps others still hidden in caves, sediments, and fragments too small to notice at first glance. Which is, honestly, a little rude of the past. You try to understand it, and it keeps leaving clues in pieces the size of a tooth. You sit close to the fire, feeling its warmth on your knees while your back remains touched by night cold. The people around you are wrapped in animal skins, not because it looks dramatic for a documentary, but because the air demands it. Fur, hide, sinew, wood, bone, and stone are the materials of survival. Nothing is casual here. A broken tool matters, a dull blade matters, a lost ember matters. Behind you, a shelter leans against a low rock face. Its frame is made from branches bent and tied with plant fibres or strips of hide. Dry grass is packed into gaps to keep out the wind. The ground beneath you has been softened with hides, leaves, and old ash. Smoke has settled into everything, your hair, your clothing, your skin. It is not unpleasant after a while. It becomes the smell of safety, beyond the camp. The land opens into a shadowed valley. There are trees along the river, their bare branches moving gently. Farther away, low hills rise against the stars. Ice may not cover this exact place, but its influence is everywhere. The climate is colder than the world you know. Seasons can be harsh. Animals move in great patterns. Human groups must follow, remember, adapt, and cooperate. Before you imagine ancient life as constant panic. Though, slow down. This is not a scene of endless terror. It's also ordinary. Someone has placed a stone scraper near a hide that needs softening. Someone else has stacked dry wood carefully under an overhang. A child sleeps with one hand tucked beneath their cheek. An elder shifts near the fire and pulls a covering closer around their shoulders. Daily life, even here, has rhythms. You watch as a person at the edge of the fire lifts a dark piece of flint and strikes it with another stone. Tap. Pause. Tap again. A thin flake breaks away, sharp enough to cut meat, scrape wood, or shape bone. The sound is small, But in this quiet world, it feels almost like speech. Knowledge is moving through hands, not written, not explained in a classroom, but shown, repeated, corrected, remembered. A quirky, lesser-known tidbit is that archaeologists can sometimes identify ancient tool-making places from scattered stone flakes left behind, almost like prehistoric workshop crumbs. Someone sat there, worked there, made mistakes there, and moved on thousands of years later. The leftovers can still whisper that a mind was present. You lean closer, watching the sparks rise. In this story, we're following a question that sounds strange at first, but becomes softer the longer you hold it. What if we were not alone for a very long time, not alone in the cosmic sense? No tiny green visitors, no dramatic glowing spacecraft disturbing an otherwise peaceful evening, just other humans, close enough to us to share ancestry. Different enough that meeting them may have felt both familiar and deeply unfamiliar. Researchers continue to question exactly how often different human groups met, how they understood one another, and how much contact shaped the people who came after. Some encounters may have been rare, some may have been tense, some may have been practical, quiet, almost ordinary. A group near a river, another group passing through the trees, a shared hunting ground, a stolen glance across firelight. You look into the darkness beyond the camp and imagine another fire somewhere out there. Perhaps it is hidden beyond the ridge. Perhaps smoke from it rises in the morning, thin and grey, almost mistaken for mist. Around that other fire, people may be sitting too. Their bodies might be stockier, their faces broader, their tools made in a slightly different way. They might know the valley better than you do. They might have names for streams and cliffs, though those names will never be written down. You would not call them monsters. You would not call them animals, if you were wise. You would not call them primitive either. That word has a way of making the past sound simple, and the past is never simple. They endure cold. They care for children. They learn the movements of animals. They make fire, shape tools, remember safe paths, and perhaps look up at the same stars with thoughts we can only guess at. The fire pops softly, and for a moment everyone stirs. Then the camp settles again. You notice how little separates comfort from danger here. A few steps from the warmth, the cold grows stronger. A little farther, the dark thickens between trees. Your modern room may have walls, locks, switches, and a glowing phone nearby. Here, protection is made from attention. Someone must notice the wind changing. Someone must hear the branch break. Someone must remember which berries are safe, which tracks are fresh, which silence feels wrong, and yet the night is beautiful. There is frost beginning to gather on stones near the river. The water moves slowly, carrying reflected stars in broken lines. The smell of damp earth rises under the smoke. Somewhere nearby, an owl calls once, then disappears back into the dark. A sleeping child murmurs, and an adult reaches out without waking, placing a hand gently over the small shoulder. That gesture is history too, not the kind carved into monuments, but the kind that keeps a species alive. As you sit beside this fire, you begin to sense the deep mystery beneath the topic. The hidden human species that may have lived beside us for tens of thousands of years were not merely scientific puzzles. They were neighbours in the largest, strangest meaning of the word. Their lives unfolded under weather, hunger, affection, fear, patience, and memory. Their days were made of smoke, stone, skin, bone, river mud, animal tracks, and evening light. And perhaps, somewhere beyond the trees, another group is listening too, not dramatically, not with music swelling, just listening, the way people do at night when they know the world is wide, and the dark is full of things that matter. You pull your covering closer. The fire lowers slightly, glowing red beneath a soft layer of ash. The valley holds its breath. Above you, the stars remain sharp and ancient, watching over more than one kind of human life. For now, you stay beside the warmth. For now, you let the question rest quietly with you. Were we ever truly alone? The fire answers only by crackling softly into the night. The fire from the night before has not fully died. It rests in the ash like a secret that still remembers heat. When you open your eyes, the world is grey and blue, held in that quiet space before sunrise when shapes are soft and the cold has not yet decided how sharp it wants to be. You sit up slowly, your covering slips from your shoulder, and the air touches your skin with a patient chill. Around you, the camp begins to wake in small movements. A hand reaches for a bundle of dried grass. Someone coughs gently. Someone else breaks a thin branch and feeds it into the embers. The smoke rises again, pale and slow, carrying the smell of old wood, damp hide, and yesterday's meal. Before you walk farther into this ancient world, it helps to understand the larger background around you. This is not the age of cities or farming fields. There are no planted rows of grain, no herds kept behind fences, no pottery jars lined neatly along a wall. People live by moving with seasons, rivers, plants, and animals. Their technology is simple compared with ours, but not simple in thought. Stone must be chosen carefully. Fire must be protected. Paths must be remembered across landscapes that change with weather, flood, snow, and hunger. And you are walking through a time when humanity is not a single kind. That idea feels strange from the comfort of the modern world. Because today, Homo sapiens are the only surviving human species. Everyone you pass in a city, every person on a train, every sleepy viewer listening under a blanket, belongs to one surviving branch. But in the deep past, the human family tree had many living branches at once. Some were close to us, some were more distant. Some are known from skeletons, some are known from tools, some are known from a tiny bone fragment that makes scientists lean closer and whisper. Well, that complicates things, which is often how science begins its most interesting evenings. A mainstream historical fact is that Neanderthals and Homo sapiens overlapped in time for thousands of years, especially in Western Eurasia. Neanderthals had existed long before modern humans spread widely into Europe. They knew cold landscapes, large animals, seasonal scarcity, and stone technology in ways that were deeply adapted to their world. They were not a failed draft of us. They were their own people, shaped by their own long history. You stand and follow the waking group toward the river. Frost crunches lightly beneath your feet. The ground is uneven, pressed with old prints from humans, deer, and smaller animals that pass during the night. Thin reeds stand at the water's edge, coated in silver. The river moves in a slow, dark ribbon between stones, reflecting the first faint light. A woman kneels near the bank and tests the mud with her fingertips. Nearby, another person studies tracks where something heavy crossed before dawn. The group does not speak loudly. Their communication is quiet, efficient, full of glances, gestures, and low sounds. Even without understanding every word, you can feel meaning moving between them. Farther away, beyond a patch of trees, the land rises into a low ridge. Smoke might be hidden there. A shelter might be tucked under rock. Another group might be watching the same river from a different angle. You're beginning to feel the deep unease and wonder of this period. Not fear, exactly, more like awareness. The world is shared. Scholars remain divided on how frequent direct contact was between different ancient human groups in many regions. In some places, groups may have avoided one another most of the time, separated by distance, climate, or habit. In other places, they may have crossed paths more often, especially where rivers, caves, hunting grounds, and seasonal routes overlapped. The evidence is quiet. and quiet evidence asks for patience. You walk with the group as the sun rises behind the trees. The light comes slowly, touching the tips of branches first, then the stones, then the breath steaming from people's mouths. Someone carries a spear with a carefully shaped point. Someone else carries a skin bag that smells faintly of dried berries and fat. A child walks close to an older sibling, stepping into their footprints as if the world is easier when someone has already pressed a path into it. The air is full of small sounds, water against stone, leather creaking, a bird calling from a distant tree, the soft scrape of a stone tool being adjusted inside a bundle. These are the sounds of life before metal, before wheels, before written calendars. Yet nothing here feels empty or meaningless. Every object has a use. Every movement has memory behind it. Today, if you need warmth, you might press a button, turn a dial, or complain quietly that the heater is making a weird noise again. Here, warmth is a living responsibility. Fire must be carried from camp to camp, fed, shielded, and coaxed back when it fades. Losing it may mean hours of work, or worse. A night that feels far longer than any modern inconvenience. A quirky lesser-known tidbit is that some prehistoric groups may have transported embers in containers made from bark, fungus, or other slow-burning materials, though the exact methods varied and are hard to prove. Imagine carrying fire not as an idea, but as a small, glowing companion that needs care. Not very convenient, but then again, it does not require a charging cable. You pause at the edge of a clearing, across the open ground. The grasses lie bent where animals have moved through. The group becomes still. Someone raises a hand. Everyone listens. At first, you hear only wind, then, faintly, something else. A tapping sound, stone against stone. It comes from beyond the trees, irregular but deliberate. Tap, pause, tap, tap. The sound is familiar because you heard it beside your own fire. Tool making, someone is working stone nearby. No one rushes forward. No one cries out. The group simply listens. The morning seems to grow wider around the sound. Even the river feels quieter, as if the valley itself understands that something important might be close. You look toward the trees and imagine them there. Another human group. Perhaps Neanderthals. If you're in a cold valley of Europe or Western Asia, perhaps a different population of Homo sapiens, perhaps in another region and another time. Denisovans or some human group not yet clearly named. The exact identity shifts with place and century, but the feeling remains. The Earth once held many forms of human life. This is not fantasy. It is the patient reconstruction of bones, tools, ancient campsites, cave sediments, and DNA. It is a story built from fragments. Yes, but fragments can still carry astonishing weight. A tooth can change a timeline. A finger bone can reveal a whole population. A few genes in living people can show that meetings happened long before history had the ink. The person beside you touches your arm lightly, guiding you away from the clearing. The group chooses not to approach, not today. Perhaps they know these sounds. Perhaps they have heard them before. Perhaps caution is not hostility, but wisdom. You follow quietly, stepping through cold grass that wets your ankles, behind you. The tapping continues for a little while, then stops. No dramatic meeting, no grand moment, just the knowledge that someone else is near. As the sun lifts higher, the group moves along the riverbank, and the world opens in pale morning light. You carry with you the sound of stone on stone, a small echo from another fire, another memory, another kind of human presence living beside your own. And slowly, the deep past feels less like an empty stage and more like a crowded, breathing landscape, where different human lives pass close enough to leave traces in mud, bone, and blood. You keep walking beside the river, with the sound of distant tool-making still resting somewhere behind your thoughts. The morning has grown brighter, but not warmer by much. Pale sunlight spreads across the valley in long, slanting bands, catching on frost, damp grass, and the dark backs of stones half buried in the mud. The group moves slowly now. No one is chasing anything. No one is fleeing. This is the quieter kind of survival, the part that rarely gets celebrated in dramatic stories, but probably filled most ancient days, watching, listening, reading the ground, deciding whether a valley is safe, whether a river bend is useful, whether the tracks ahead are fresh enough to matter. Before you follow the marks along the water, it helps to understand the world beneath your feet. In this era, the landscape is not covered by roads or signs. A river is a route, a food source, a boundary, and sometimes a meeting place. Animal paths lead toward water. Human groups return to useful crossings. Caves and rock shelters near rivers can hold warmth, shade, visibility, and access to flint or other workable stone. So if different human groups lived in the same region, it is not hard to imagine their movements overlapping in places like this. You step closer to the muddy bank. The mud is soft from night moisture, dark and shining in the low light. At first, the ground looks messy, like any patch of trampled river edge. Then your eyes adjust. Shapes begin to separate. Hoof marks, bird tracks, the drag of a branch, the shallow oval of a human foot. Someone in your group kneels and points. You crouch beside them, feeling damp cold seep through the covering around your knees. The print is not perfectly preserved. The edge is slumped slightly. A thin film of water glitters inside the heel, but it is clear enough to hold everyone's attention. A footprint, maybe from your own group, maybe not. You look down at your own foot, wrapped in hide and plant fibre, then back at the mark. It is broad, the toes pressed into the mud with weight, the stride that follows, just visible a little farther along the bank, seems heavy and steady. There are no words spoken for a while, only the river moving beside you. A mainstream historical fact is that archaeologists have found ancient human footprints in several parts of the world, and such prints can reveal details that bones alone cannot, including walking direction, group movement, body size, and sometimes whether adults and children travel together. Footprints are fragile records, but when preserved by mud, ash, sand, or mineral deposits, they can feel startlingly immediate. A bone tells you someone lived. A footprint tells you someone passed by. That is a different kind of intimacy. You follow the tracks along the riverbank. The group spreads out slightly. Careful not to step on the clearest marks. You notice how the prints appear, vanish under reeds, then return near a patch of firmer mud. Nearby, there are other signs. A broken reed bent toward the water, a small scatter of stone flakes half hidden near a flat rock. A place where something was perhaps cut, scraped, or cleaned. The wind brings the smell of wet earth, cold water, an animal musk from somewhere upstream. You can hear insects faintly in the grass despite the chill, and birds shifting in the branches above. The world feels awake now, but still gentle. One older member of the group studies the flakes near the rock. They lift one between thumb and finger, turn it toward the light, and set it down again. The motion is careful, almost respectful. This flake may not belong to your people. Its shape, angle, and method of removal might suggest a different way of working stone. Not completely alien, just distinct. The deep past often speaks in tiny differences. One edge retouched this way instead of that way. One core prepared with a slightly different plan. One tool carried farther than expected. One campsite used and reused by different hands. You begin to understand how patient a person must be to study ancient lives. It is not always a grand skeleton waiting in a heroic pose. Sometimes it is a broken flake, a smear of ash, and a question mark. A quirky, lesser-known tidbit is that some prehistoric footprints show children moving alongside adults, and in a few rare cases, ancient trackways suggest moments that feel almost ordinary, like small feet wandering, pausing, or stepping irregularly near larger prints. It is a reminder that prehistory was not lived only by hunters and toolmakers in serious poses. It was also lived by children who probably got distracted, tired, curious, and mildly inconvenient. As children have bravely continued to be ever since. You smile at that thought, just a little. Then the group stops again, ahead, near a bend in the river. The mud shows several prints crossing from the water toward the trees. More than one person, perhaps 3, perhaps 4. The marks are older than the freshest animal tracks, but not ancient. Last night, maybe. Yesterday. Close enough that the group becomes very still. Researchers continue to question how easily different human species recognized each other as familiar or foreign. Would a Homo sapiens group seeing Neanderthal tracks understand them as belonging to people like themselves? Would they interpret them as neighbours, rivals, strangers, or simply another presence in a crowded landscape? The answer probably varied from place to place, group to group, and moment to moment. You look toward the trees. Nothing moves except branches shifting in the wind, yet the silence feels inhabited. This is where imagination must remain careful. You do not know whether the tracks belong to Neanderthals, another Homo sapiens group, or some population now lost to the archaeological record. But you can feel the larger truth. The world before only us was full of overlap. People followed rivers, people sought shelter, people needed food, water, stone, wood, and safety where needs are shared, paths cross. A person beside you touches the mud lightly, then gestures toward the prints and toward the ridge. Another person shakes their head. A third looks upriver, perhaps thinking of a safer crossing. There is no panic, just calculation. The group chooses to move away from the clearest trail. You follow them through grass towards slightly higher ground. The river remains visible through the reeds, flashing silver between stems. Your feet make soft sounds on damp soil. Somewhere behind you, the prints wait in the mud, slowly softening as sunlight warms the bank. Today, we might see a footprint near our home and think of delivery drivers, neighbours, muddy shoes by the door, and perhaps whether someone forgot to wipe their feet again. Here. A footprint is a message without words. It may mean opportunity. It may mean caution. It may mean nothing immediate at all. Still, no one ignores it. As the group climbs the low slope, you glance back once more. The river bends away into mist. The prints are almost invisible from here. Yet they have changed the morning. The valley no longer feels like a place your group simply passes through. It feels shared, layered, alive with movements you cannot fully see. You remember the tapping sound from earlier, stone against stone, then the broad print in the mud, then the flakes by the rock. Not a meeting. Not yet, just signs, and sometimes signs are enough to make the pass feel close. A foot pressed into wet earth, a hand shaped a flake, a fire burned beyond the trees. Another human life moved through the same cold morning and left the faintest trace behind. You walk on quietly, carrying that trace with you. The tracks by the river are behind you now. Though not entirely forgotten, they linger in your thoughts the way a distant sound lingers after it fades. The group has climbed onto higher ground, where the earth is drier and the wind moves more freely through scattered trees. Sunlight has strengthened, warming stones and patches of grass, but the air still carries the cool edge of an ancient world. You walk steadily with the others, following a route known more by memory than by markers. No signs point the way, no maps wait folded inside a pocket. The landscape itself is the guide. A particular rock formation, a bend in the river, a cluster of trees that appears each season like an old acquaintance as the morning stretches onward. Your mind returns to the possibility suggested by those footprints. Who left them? And perhaps more importantly, what would happen if you actually met them? It is one thing to study ancient bones in a museum. It is another thing entirely to imagine standing face to face with another human species beneath an open sky. The question has fascinated scientists for generations. What did these other humans truly look like? Popular culture has often given simple answers. Films and illustrations sometimes portray ancient humans as either nearly identical to modern people or dramatically different creatures who seem barely human at all. Reality is usually more interesting. Evidence from fossil discoveries indicates that many ancient human relatives shared a surprising number of traits with us. They walked upright, they used tools, they controlled fire, they cared for their young, they adapted to difficult environments. Yet each group also carried physical features shaped by hundreds of thousands of years of separate evolution. You pause beside a rocky outcrop while the group rests. The stone beneath your hand feels cool and slightly rough. Small patches of lichen cling to cracks in the surface. Nearby, someone drinks from a skin container. Another person checks the edge of a stone blade, turning it carefully toward the light. The ordinary nature of these actions is important, because when you imagine another human species, it is easy to focus only on differences. But imagine instead the similarities: a family sitting beside a fire, someone repairing a tool, someone comforting a frightened child, someone wondering whether tomorrow's hunt will succeed. The gap between species begins to feel smaller. Current evidence points to Neanderthals as one of our closest relatives. They possessed robust bodies, broad chests, powerful limbs, and distinctive facial features that included prominent brow ridges and large noses. These characteristics likely helped them survive colder climates across Ice Age Europe and Western Asia. Yet if you encountered a Neanderthal from a moderate distance, you would probably recognize them as human immediately. Different, certainly, but unmistakably human. You continue along the ridge as a gentle breeze carries the scent of pine resin and damp soil. Somewhere below, hidden by trees, water flows over stones. The rhythmic sound follows you like quiet music. One intriguing aspect of this story comes from attempts by artists and scientists to reconstruct ancient faces. As new evidence emerges, reconstructions often become more lifelike and familiar. Some Neanderthal faces appear less like strange prehistoric beings and more like people you might pass on a busy street after a particularly exhausting winter, perhaps with a very impressive beard. And possibly an intense commitment to outdoor activities. The thought makes you smile. The group reaches a clearing where sunlight pools across the grass. Here they stop briefly to gather edible plants growing near the edge of the trees. Fingers move carefully through leaves and stems. Knowledge guides every choice. A mistake could mean illness. Success means another meal. You kneel to examine the plants yourself. The earth smells rich and damp. Tiny insects move between roots. A bird lands briefly on a nearby branch before darting away again. Life fills every corner of the landscape, and somewhere within landscapes like this, different human groups likely lived remarkably close to one another. Researchers continue to disagree about exactly how distinct these encounters felt. If modern humans and Neanderthals met regularly enough, perhaps differences seemed less dramatic over time. Familiarity has a way of softening strangeness. On the other hand, if meetings were rare, each encounter may have felt extraordinary. There is no perfect answer, only possibilities scattered across time. You imagine seeing another group emerge from the trees. At first, you might notice posture, then clothing, then tools, then faces. Perhaps their voices sound different. Perhaps their speech rhythm feels unfamiliar. Perhaps communication begins with gestures rather than words. The encounter might contain caution, curiosity, suspicion, recognition, or all four at once. The human mind is remarkably skilled at noticing patterns, even today. People quickly recognize expressions, intentions, and emotions in strangers. Ancient humans likely possessed similar abilities: a smile, a warning gesture, a shared focus on food or danger could communicate a great deal without requiring complex language. The wind shifts, clouds drift slowly across the sun. For a moment the clearing dims and shadows stretch across the grass. You remember that these ancient encounters happened over immense spans of time, not decades, not centuries, tens of thousands of years. That scale is difficult to grasp. Today, 100 years feels like history. 10,000 years feels almost mythical. Yet during portions of that vast timeline, different human groups occupied overlapping regions of the world. The archaeological record shows that Homo sapiens spread gradually into territories already inhabited by other human populations. The process was neither instantaneous nor uniform. Some regions saw overlap for long periods, others experienced brief contact. Every valley, coastline, forest, and mountain range had its own story. A remarkable observation comes from the study of ancient genetics. Modern humans outside Africa still carry small amounts of Neanderthal DNA. This means meetings were not always distant observations from opposite sides of a river, at least sometimes. The story became much more personal. Families formed, children were born, generations followed, ancient boundaries blurred. The realization changes how you picture the past. Instead of separate lines moving across a map, you begin to see a web of relationships, messy, complex, human. The group resumes walking. The afternoon light grows softer as clouds drift overhead. Grass brushes gently against your legs. The smell of wood smoke lingers faintly from the camp left behind earlier in the day. You look across the valley. Somewhere beyond those ridges, another fire might be burning. Around that fire, another group may be preparing food, repairing tools, telling stories, or watching children play. Their faces may differ from yours, their traditions may differ from yours, yet much of daily life would feel strangely familiar. They worry about food, they care about family, they fear injury, they seek warmth, they watch the weather, they remember the dead, they hope to survive another season. The deeper you travel into prehistory, the more complicated the idea of humanity becomes. Perhaps humanity was never a single thing. Perhaps it was once a chorus of closely related voices sharing the same world. Some voices lasted longer, some faded earlier, but for thousands of years they may all have echoed beneath the same stars. You continue walking through the quiet afternoon, carrying that thought with you. Not as a scientific puzzle alone, but as a reminder that the ancient world was fuller, stranger, and more crowded than we once imagined. And somewhere beyond the next ridge, another pair of eyes may be watching the same horizon. The afternoon bends slowly toward evening, as you follow the group across the ridge and down toward a darker line of stone in the distance. At first, it looks like a shadow lying at the base of the hill. Then, as you draw closer, the shape becomes clearer. A cave mouth opens beneath an overhang, half hidden by scrub, grass, and the leaning trunks of wind-shaped trees. The air changes before you enter. Outside, the valley breathes with moving light, birdsong, and cold wind. Near the cave, the world becomes stiller. The stone seems to hold a temperature of its own, cool even where sunlight touches it. Dampness rises from the entrance. You can smell mineral water, old smoke, animal musk, and earth that has not seen the sky in a very long time. Before stepping inside, it helps to understand why caves matter so much in the story of ancient humans. They were not always permanent homes, and not every prehistoric group lived deep inside them like characters in an old cartoon. Many people likely used cave mouths, rock shelters, and overhangs as temporary places to sleep, work, butcher animals, prepare hides, or wait out bad weather. The deeper chambers, when used, could hold something more mysterious, like images, signs, echoes, and memories. Evidence from excavated cave sites shows that ancient humans used sheltered places repeatedly across long periods. Ash layers, bones, stone tools, pigments, and footprints can build up in the same cave over thousands of years. One generation enters, leaves traces, disappears. Another comes later, then another. The cave keeps all of them in its dark, patient way. You pause at the threshold. A person from your group bends and studies the ground. The soil near the entrance is packed hard by old movement. There are animal tracks, human marks, broken bits of stone, and the faint remains of charcoal mixed into the dirt. The cave is not empty, or at least, it has not always been empty. Someone lifts a burning branch from a small bundle of embers carried carefully through the day. Dry grass catches, then twigs, then a thicker piece of wood. The flame grows, its light trembles against the stone walls, and the cave seems to wake slowly around you. You step inside. The first chamber is wide enough for several people to stand. The ceiling lowers toward one side. Water drips somewhere in the dark with a soft, regular sound. Your footsteps press into dusty earth. The air feels cooler on your face and heavier in your lungs. Firelight moves across bumps, cracks, and mineral streaks in the stone. At first, you see only rock. Then someone raises the torch. Shapes appear, a line of dark pigment, a curve like the back of an animal, a cluster of marks near a hollow in the wall. You move closer, carefully, almost without breathing. The image is faded but still present. Perhaps it shows a bison, a horse, a deer, or some animal important to the people who once came here. Its body follows the natural curve of the stone, as if the painter saw the animal already hidden in the wall and simply helped it emerge. One curious detail is that some cave artists use the natural shapes of cave walls to guide their images, turning bulges, cracks, and shadows into parts of animal bodies in flickering firelight. Those images may have seemed to move. A painted flank could swell and shrink as flame shifted. A horn could appear from darkness, vanish, then return, which means prehistoric art may have had very good lighting design, long before anyone invented the phrase lighting design. You stand in the glow and imagine people here long before you, hands holding pigment, fingers pressing against stone, breath visible in cold cave air, the smell of smoke thickening under the ceiling. Outside, a living world of hunger, weather, and migration. Inside, a still world where animals, signs, and perhaps stories gathered on stone. Researchers continue to disagree about the full meaning of Paleolithic cave art. Some suggest it was connected to hunting beliefs, ritual practice, teaching, memory, identity, or altered states of experience. Others warn that no single explanation fits every cave, every image, or every region. The evidence is powerful, but it does not speak in one simple voice, and that uncertainty is part of the calm mystery. You walk deeper, following the torchlight. The cave narrows into a passage where the stone brushes your shoulder. The air smells wetter here. Your hand trails lightly along the wall, feeling cold ridges beneath your fingertips, somewhere ahead. A drop of water falls into a shallow pool. The sound repeats, gentle and hollow, in a side chamber. The group finds older traces, a hearth stain, black and grey. Animal bones cracked open for marrow. Stone flakes scattered near a flat working surface. These remains do not belong to this morning. They may not belong to your group at all. The arrangement feels familiar, but not identical. The tools are shaped in ways that suggest another tradition, another set of hands, another pattern of teaching. The archaeological record indicates that different human populations sometimes use the same landscapes, and in certain cases, the same caves or rock shelters, though not necessarily at the same moment. A cave could be a shelter for Neanderthals in one period, Homo sapiens in another, and animals in between. Time layers itself here like blankets in the dark. You kneel near the old hearth. The ash has long gone cold. It is no longer soft enough to warm anyone. Still, it tells you that fire once lived here. Someone sat beside it. Someone fed it. Someone perhaps held out chilled hands, just as you did last night. The thought softens the cave. These are not just remains, they are leftovers of comfort. You look around at the chamber. The stone ceiling curves low above you. Smoke stains darken one section. A faint draught slides through a crack, touching the side of your face. The torch crackles in someone's hand, casting long shadows that stretch and fold over the walls. For a moment, you imagine two memories overlapping, your group entering now, another group entering long before. A Neanderthal child sitting near the same stone, a sapiens hunter sharpening a blade centuries later, an animal sheltering here during a storm, a painter touching pigment to wall in a silence so deep it feels almost sacred. The cave holds all of them without choosing. That is what caves do. They remember without explaining. A small but fascinating clue from some prehistoric sites is the survival of hand stencils, made when people placed a hand against the wall and blew pigment around it. The result is not a portrait. Exactly. But it feels personal. A hand shape remains after the person is gone. Fingers spread in a gesture that crosses impossible distances. You raise your own hand near the wall, not touching the ancient marks, only hovering close. Your fingers are warm from walking, the stone is cold. Between the two is time. Outside, wind moves through the valley. Inside, the firelight trembles. The group speaks softly now, as if the cave has asked for quiet. Even the smallest sound seems important here. A breath, a footstep, a drop of water, a spark. As evening gathers beyond the entrance, you understand why this place matters. It is not only shelter, it is a chamber of older human presence. It suggests that before civilization, before writing, before names recorded in any language, people were already leaving signs for reasons practical, emotional, symbolic, or perhaps all at once. And if other human species use places like this too, then the cave becomes even deeper in meaning. Not one kind of human memory, many. You turn back toward the entrance. The sky outside is dimming. The cave mouth glows blue with evening light, while the torch glows orange behind you. For a little while, you stand between both colours, between outside and inside, between living breath and ancient trace, between your own kind and those other human presences that may have passed through the same stone darkness long before. Then the group moves toward the fading light, leaving the cave quiet again. Behind you, the old walls keep their images, their ash, their silence, their older memories. You leave the cave as evening settles across the valley, carrying the smell of smoke and damp stone with you. Behind you, the dark entrance grows smaller between the trees, until it becomes only a shadow in the hillside again. The group moves toward a sheltered place near a stand of pines, where the ground is dry enough for resting and the wind is softened by branches. A new fire is coaxed into life. At first, it is only a glow, then a thin flame, then a steady warmth that gathers everyone closer. Sparks rise into the blue evening air. Someone lays pieces of wood across the flames. Someone else unwraps a bundle of tools from a hide. Stone, bone, antler, wood, sinew, and dried plant fibre appear one by one beside the hearth. This is the workshop of the deep past. No tables, no shelves, no polished metal instruments, just the ground, the fire, the hand, the eye, and a knowledge carried across generations. before you watch the tools being made. It helps to understand how important technology was in this world. Prehistoric technology was not primitive in the sense of careless or crude. It was practical, learned, and often beautifully efficient. A stone blade could prepare food, shape wood, scrape hides, cut plants, and help make other tools. The difference between a useful edge and a broken lump of rock could mean warmth, clothing, food, and safety. Archaeological evidence shows that Neanderthals, Homo sapiens, and other ancient human groups made and used stone tools, often with distinct traditions and techniques. Some methods required careful planning before the first flake was even struck. The toolmaker had to imagine the shape hidden inside the stone, then remove pieces in the right order. You sit near the fire and watch. A person selects a core of flint from a small pile. It is dark grey, smooth in some places, rough in others. They turn it in their hands, feeling the angles with their fingers. Firelight glints along the stone. Then they lift a hammerstone and strike. Tap. A flake jumps away. Tap again. Another thin piece falls onto the hide spread across the ground. The sound is gentle but precise, like rain beginning on a roof far away. Around the fire, no one seems surprised. This is everyday work, yet to you, it feels almost magical. Because the toolmaker is not simply breaking stone, they're releasing sharpness from it. One often overlooked detail is that stone tool making leaves behind many flakes that were never meant to become final tools. These flakes are not useless to archaeologists. They can reveal the order of strikes, the skill of the maker, and even whether someone was learning. A messy scatter may quietly say, "Here, someone practiced." You glance at a child sitting nearby. The child watches intently, eyes reflecting the fire. After a while, an adult hands them a less valuable piece of stone and a small hammer. The child imitates the motion, striking too softly at first, then too hard. A flake breaks badly. No one laughs. The adult adjusts the child's grip and shows the angle again. There it is. Education before schools. A lesson without a blackboard. A slightly stressful craft class, but with higher survival value. You listen as the fire crackles. The smell of resin comes from the pine branches. Cold creeps in from behind. But your front is warmed by flames nearby. Someone scrapes a hide stretched across a log, pulling a stone scraper over the surface in slow, firm strokes. The sound is rough and rhythmic. Scrape, pause, scrape. Fibers loosen, fat and tissue are removed. A hide becomes clothing, bedding, shelter, or a carrying bag. Every tool leads to another task. Every task leads to life continuing. The question remains unsettled when it comes to how different human groups may have exchanged technology. Some specialists propose that certain tool styles spread through contact and learning between populations, while others argue that similar needs could produce similar solutions independently. A sharp edge is useful in many places. After all, the past does enjoy making tidy conclusions difficult, perhaps because it never expected to be graded. Someone near the fire works with bone. They hold a long splinter and smooth it with stone. The material is pale, slightly curved, and polished from handling. It may become a point, an awl, or a needle-like tool. Bone, antler, and ivory can be shaped into objects that stone cannot easily provide. These materials bend the possibilities of the hand. You notice how the fire is part of the workshop too. It hardens wood. It gives light. It warms fingers. It changes food. It protects the camp. Without fire, work would slow as darkness grew. With fire, evening becomes useful. The circle of light becomes a small room made of warmth. Excavations at ancient sites have revealed hearths surrounded by stone flakes, burned bone, tools, and food remains. These patterns suggest that the fireside was often a centre of daily life, not only for eating and warmth, but for repair, conversation, teaching, and planning. The hearth was technology, meeting place, kitchen, workshop, and nightlight all at once. You pick up a finished flake from the hide. Its edge catches the light. It is thin, sharper than it looks, and a little frightening in its simplicity. You understand, very quickly, why hands must be careful. A tool like this can open an animal hide, cut sinew, shape wood, or slice a careless finger. Ancient life had many opportunities to be humbling. Across the fire, someone binds a stone point to a wooden shaft. They use sinew, wrapping it tightly, wetting it, pulling it firm. When the sinew dries, it will shrink and hold the point more securely. A dark resin or adhesive may be warmed near the fire and used to help fasten the pieces together. A fascinating clue from prehistoric technology is that some ancient adhesives required several steps and ingredients, such as birch tar or plant resins mixed with other materials. Making glue may not sound dramatic, but it represents planning, experimentation, and patience. Truly, one of humanity's great early achievements was looking at a sticky substance and thinking, yes, this can solve several problems. The group works quietly, no one wastes much. A broken blade can become a smaller scraper. A bone fragment can become a point. A hide scrap can become a tie. A failed object may still teach the next attempt. You begin to see tools not as isolated objects, but as evidence of minds in motion. To make a tool is to imagine a future task. To carry one is to prepare for a need that has not yet arrived. To teach tool-making is to place tomorrow's survival into another person's hands. And if another human species sat beside another hearth, doing the same kind of work in its own way, then the distance between your worlds narrows again. You imagine that other fire beyond the ridge. There too, perhaps, someone chooses a stone, someone strikes carefully, someone teaches a child, someone repairs a wooden shaft while smoke climbs into the dark. The tools may differ. The hands may differ, but the rhythm is familiar. Tap, scrape, rap, warm, wait. Night thickens around the camp. The valley disappears beyond the firelight. Above, stars emerge one by one, bright and cold. The finished tools are placed close to sleeping places, not as treasures for display, but as companions for tomorrow. You lie back near the hearth, listening to the final scraping of stone against hide. The sound slows, the fire lowers. The ancient workshop settles into sleep. The fire is burned low by morning. You wake to the smell of smoke caught in clothing and hair. A scent that now feels almost comforting. Thin threads of mist drift across the valley floor. Pine needles glisten with moisture. Somewhere beyond the trees, water continues its patient journey downhill, sounding much the same as it did yesterday, and perhaps much the same as it did thousands of years before that. The camp stirs gradually. No alarms, no schedules, no glowing screens demanding immediate attention. Only daylight spreading across the land and the quiet understanding that another day of survival has begun. As people feed the fire and prepare to move, your thoughts return to the mysterious figures who may have walked these same valleys long before, or perhaps at the same time, among all of vanished human relatives. One group stands closer to the center of the story than any other. The Neanderthals. For generations they occupied a peculiar place in the human imagination. They were often portrayed as crude, dim-witted cave dwellers, lumbering through prehistory while waiting to be replaced by supposedly superior modern humans. The truth turns out to be considerably more interesting. You leave camp with a group and follow a path climbing toward rocky hills. The morning air feels sharp against your cheeks. Every breath carries the scent of damp earth and pine resin. Ravens circle overhead, their calls echoing from stone cliffs in the distance. The landscape itself helps explain part of the Neanderthal story. Ice Age Europe was often a demanding place. Temperatures fluctuated. Glaciers advanced and retreated. Forests expanded and contracted. Herds moved across enormous territories. Survival required flexibility, knowledge, and resilience. Fossil discoveries reveal that Neanderthals thrived in these environments for hundreds of thousands of years. They were not temporary visitors. They were established inhabitants whose ancestors had adapted to challenging conditions long before Homo sapiens arrived in many regions. You pause on a hillside overlooking the valley. The wind is stronger here. Below, rivers twist through grasslands and patches of woodland. Herd animals move like scattered shadows in the distance. It is easy to imagine why human groups return to places like this again and again. A Neanderthal standing here would have seen many of the same opportunities: food, water, shelter, migration routes, the signs of life hidden within the landscape. One of the most remarkable findings from recent decades is the growing evidence for Neanderthal sophistication. Archaeological sites have revealed carefully crafted tools, controlled use of fire, hunting strategies, and signs of planning that required intelligence and cooperation. The old stereotype has steadily crumbled, and honestly, it deserved to. You continue climbing until the group reaches a sheltered area among large boulders. Here they stop briefly to observe the valley below. Several people scan the distance. Others examine animal tracks crossing between patches of grass. Observation is survival. The same would have been true for Neanderthals. A detail that often surprises people is the sheer physical strength Neanderthals likely possessed. Their skeletons suggest heavily muscled bodies built for demanding lives. Broad shoulders, powerful arms, and dense bones speak of years spent carrying, climbing, hunting, scraping hides, processing wood, and enduring cold environments. Yet strength alone does not explain their success. A bear is strong, a mammoth is strong, human survival depends on something more: knowledge, memory, cooperation, the ability to learn from one another. The archaeological picture becomes clearer when researchers examine repeated patterns across different Neanderthal sites. Similar tool traditions appear across large regions. Certain techniques persisted for long periods. Such consistency suggests teaching and cultural transmission. Someone learned, someone taught, someone remembered. A child watched an elder shape stone. Years later, that child taught another generation. The chain continued, not unlike the tool-making lesson you witnessed beside the fire. Clouds drift slowly across the sky. Sunlight comes and goes over the hillsides. The group resumes walking, moving toward a narrow valley where limestone cliffs rise on both sides. The cool air inside the valley feels different. Sound travels strangely here. Distant bird call echoes longer. Footsteps bounce from stone walls. Even conversation becomes softer. You imagine Neanderthals moving through places like this. Their lives were not spent entirely inside caves. Most of their existence unfolded outdoors, among rivers, forests, grasslands, and rocky terrain, like all humans. They belong to landscapes rather than isolated shelters. No complete consensus exists regarding every aspect of Neanderthal behavior. Some researchers interpret certain discoveries as evidence for symbolic thinking, while others urge caution. Questions remain about the exact nature of language, ritual practices, and social complexity. The evidence continues to grow, but some mysteries remain comfortably unsolved, and perhaps that is part of their appeal. Not every ancient life should become completely transparent. Some shadows belong in history. The group reaches a spring emerging from the base of a cliff. Clear water trickles from the rock and gathers in a shallow pool before flowing onward. People kneel to drink. You do the same. The water is cold enough to make your teeth ache slightly. Tiny ripples spread across the surface. Moss grows along the edges, bright green against pale stone. Far above, an eagle circles. The world feels peaceful. A lesser-known discovery reveals that some Neanderthal individuals survived serious injuries that would have made independent survival difficult. Healed fractures, damaged joints, and signs of long-term impairment appear in several skeletons. This suggests something important. Care. Someone brought food. Someone offered protection. Someone helped. Compassion leaves fewer traces than a spear point, but sometimes it survives nonetheless. You think about that while watching the water. It is easy to define humanity through intelligence or technology. It may be equally important to define it through care, the willingness to invest energy in another person's survival, the decision to help someone who cannot immediately repay the effort. These behaviors appear again and again throughout human history. Perhaps they reach deeper into the past than we once believed. As afternoon approaches, the valley fills with warmer light. Insects move through patches of grass. The scent of wild plants rises from sunlit slopes. The group continues its steady journey. You find yourself imagining a Neanderthal family not as museum specimens, but as living people. A child asking questions, an elder sharing knowledge, a hunter repairing equipment, a parent carrying a sleeping infant. The scene feels familiar because many parts of it are familiar. Different species, similar challenges, similar hopes. The surviving evidence strongly suggests that Neanderthals were not failed humans waiting for replacement. They were successful humans in their own right, adapted to a world that often demanded extraordinary resilience. For hundreds of thousands of years, they endured, they weathered climatic shifts, they hunted large animals, they navigated dangerous landscapes, they built lives beneath the same sun and stars that shine over you now. As shadows begin lengthening across the valley, you glance toward distant ridges fading blue in the afternoon haze. Perhaps somewhere beyond those hills, another group once watched the same sunset. Perhaps smoke rose from another fire. Perhaps laughter carried through cold evening air. The details are lost. The possibility remains. And as you continue walking through the ancient landscape, the Neanderthals seem less like strangers from a vanished world and more like neighbours whose voices have grown faint with time. Not gone entirely, just distant, waiting patiently for us to listen. As another cold evening approaches, the valley gradually gives way to higher country. The familiar scent of pine becomes thinner. Winds grow stronger along exposed ridges. Clouds drift low enough to brush distant peaks. And the world around you feels wider somehow, as though the land itself is keeping secrets. You walk with the group beneath a pale sky, following narrow paths worn not by roads, but by countless feet, both human and animal. Far below, rivers glimmer in the fading light. Snow remains on shaded slopes, refusing to surrender even as the seasons slowly shift. And somewhere far beyond these mountains, hidden from everyone alive at this moment, lies one of the greatest mysteries in the story of humanity, the Denisovans. Even their name sounds quiet. Not the name of a people who left grand monuments or painted famous walls. Not the name of a civilization. Just a name borrowed from a cave, which is fitting, because history occasionally hides its biggest surprises in the smallest places. Before exploring this mystery, it helps to remember how fragile the prehistoric record truly is. Most ancient lives disappear completely. Bones decay, wood rots, skin vanishes. Entire populations may pass through the world, leaving almost nothing behind. A few fortunate traces survive, and from those fragments scientists attempt to reconstruct entire chapters of humanity's story. Sometimes those chapters are missing. Sometimes they are waiting patiently underground. Genetic research has shown that not all ancient human relatives were known from complete skeletons. In fact, Denisovans entered modern science through astonishingly modest remains discovered in Siberia's Denisova cave. A finger bone fragment and a few teeth eventually revealed something unexpected. These people were neither Neanderthals nor Homo sapiens. They represented another branch of humanity, a branch no one had recognized before, which must have made for a very exciting week in several laboratories. You pause beside a stream cascading over smooth rocks. The water is clear enough to reveal every pebble beneath its surface. Moss clings to the stones. Cold air carries the scent of wet earth and distant snow. The group kneels to drink and refill skin containers. Above you, the sky darkens slightly as clouds gather around the mountains. You find yourself wondering, how many other branches of humanity may still remain hidden? How many stories sleep beneath layers of soil and stone? The mystery has yet to be fully resolved. Unlike Neanderthals, whose bones and sites have been studied for generations, Denisovans remain elusive. Much of what scientists know comes from DNA rather than complete skeletons. Their appearance remains uncertain. Their voices remain unknown. Their traditions remain largely invisible. It is a strange situation. Imagine trying to understand an entire people through a handful of photographs and a family recipe. Not impossible, but certainly challenging. The group moves onward, climbing toward a rocky overlook. Wind whistles softly between the stones. Evening sunlight paints the mountains in shades of gold and pale blue. You imagine another camp somewhere in this vast landscape. Not Neanderthal, not your own people, another kind of human entirely. Different faces, different memories, different stories told around the fire. Studies of ancient DNA indicate that Denisovans were widespread across parts of Asia and interacted with other human groups. Their genetic legacy survives today in several modern populations, particularly among people whose ancestors lived in regions of Southeast Asia and Oceania. Their bodies may be gone. Their descendants, in a complicated sense, are not. One particularly intriguing find suggests that Denisovans may have occupied environments ranging from cold Siberian regions to high-altitude landscapes. Such adaptability hints at remarkable flexibility. Life in these places demanded creativity. Thin air, harsh winters, changing seasons, dangerous animals, scarce resources. The mountains around you suddenly feel less empty. The evening breeze grows colder. Someone in the group pulls a hide covering tighter around their shoulders. Another person adjusts the bundle of tools they carry. The small routines of survival continue. A fire must be built. Food must be prepared. Shelter must be found. No matter the species. Evenings still arrive. No complete agreement exists concerning the exact relationships between Denisovans, Neanderthals, and modern humans. Different teams have reached different conclusions regarding timelines, migrations, and interactions. New discoveries regularly force researchers to revise earlier assumptions. Science, after all, is remarkably good at saying, well, that was unexpected, and the Denisovans seem particularly fond of surprises. The group eventually reaches a sheltered hollow protected from the wind by large stones. Dry grass rustles softly underfoot. A few twisted trees provide limited cover. It is enough. Soon the familiar rhythm returns. Wood gathered, fire coaxed to life, tools arranged, people settling close together. You sit beside the growing flames and stare into the darkness beyond the camp. What did Denisovan faces look like? What language did they speak? Did they laugh in recognizable ways? Did children interrupt serious conversations at inconvenient moments? Some mysteries resist certainty. Perhaps that is acceptable. A surprising detail preserved in the scientific record is that one extraordinary fossil discovered in Denisova Cave belonged to a young girl whose mother was Neanderthal and whose father was Denisovan. The discovery provided direct evidence that different human groups sometimes formed families together. Not merely distant neighbours, family, a daughter. A child whose existence quietly reminds us that ancient categories may have mattered less to the people themselves than they do to modern textbooks. You watch sparks rise into the night. The stars begin appearing overhead, somewhere far away, hidden by darkness and mountains. Countless camps may exist, some occupied by your own people, some by Neanderthals, some by Denisovans. The fires would all look much the same from a distance, orange points against endless darkness, small circles of warmth protecting fragile lives. Perhaps one group never knew another existed. Perhaps they exchanged knowledge. Perhaps they avoided one another. Perhaps they loved one another. The available evidence leaves room for interpretation, and there is something oddly peaceful about that. Not every mystery needs to be solved immediately. Some questions can sit quietly beside the fire. Some stories unfold slowly. The wind settles, the flames crackle. Above you, the stars shine with ancient indifference. They watched Neanderthals, they watched Denisovans, they watched Homo sapiens, they watched children grow, elders age, and countless journeys begin and end beneath their cold light. You pull your covering closer and listen to the sounds around you, wood shifting in the fire, soft conversation, the rustle of grass, distant water, and somewhere beyond the mountains, perhaps only in imagination, another fire burns. Around that fire sit people whose names history forgot. People who left almost no bones, almost no tools, almost no faces, yet somehow, through a fragment of finger bone and traces hidden inside living DNA, they speak across the ages, not loudly, not clearly, but enough. Enough to remind you that humanity was once a larger family than anyone had ever imagined, and perhaps larger still than we currently know. In the stillness of the ancient world, the night passes gently, the fire settles into glowing embers, wind moves softly around the rocks that shelter the camp. Somewhere beyond the darkness, unseen streams continue their endless journeys, and high above, the stars slowly wheel across the heavens, unaware that below them, one of the most extraordinary stories in human history is quietly unfolding. Morning arrives without ceremony, no trumpet sounds, no dramatic sunrise announces itself. Instead, pale light slowly spreads over the mountains, touching frost-covered grass and the sleeping forms gathered beneath hides and woven coverings. You open your eyes to the familiar sense of smoke, earth, and pine nearby. Someone is already feeding thin branches into the fire. A child yawns and curls closer to a parent. Another person stretches stiff muscles after a cold night. The ordinary rhythms of life begin again. And perhaps, long ago, those rhythms belonged not only to your own people. Perhaps they belonged to others as well. Perhaps, from time to time, the boundaries between different human groups became less rigid than we once imagined. You walk with the group as they descend from the rocky shelter into lower country. Mist hangs above the valleys. Water droplets cling to spiderwebs between bushes. Small birds dart through the branches, their song sounding sharp in the cool air. The world feels fresh and quiet, and it feels strangely full. Because the story of ancient humanity is not merely one of separation, it is also one of connection. Studies of ancient genomes have demonstrated that Homo sapiens and Neanderthals interbred on multiple occasions. Similar evidence points to interactions between Homo sapiens and Denisovans, and even between Neanderthals and Denisovans themselves. The human family tree, once imagined as neatly separated branches, now appears more like tangled roots beneath the soil. Life, it seems, rarely respects the diagrams found in textbooks. You smile at the thought, somewhere, an ancient family gathering may have been every bit as complicated as modern holiday dinners. The group pauses beside a meadow where deer tracks cross damp soil. Sunlight filters through morning fog, turning the grass silver. You kneel and touch the earth. It is cool and moist beneath your fingers. Nearby, someone gathers edible roots while another examines animal signs left during the night. These ordinary scenes make the larger story easier to understand. After all, people who share landscapes often share more than rivers and hunting grounds. They share opportunities, they share dangers. Sometimes they share lives. One remarkable example emerged from Denisova Cave, where scientists identified the remains of a young girl whose parents belonged to two different human groups. Her mother was Neanderthal, her father was Denisovan. She lived roughly 90,000 years ago, and for a brief time she laughed, slept, ate, and experienced the ordinary moments of childhood. Then she vanished into time, until thousands upon thousands of years later, fragments of her bones quietly revealed her existence. You wonder what her family looked like, who taught her, who comforted her, whether she liked sitting close to the fire, whether she feared storms, whether she loved stories, questions without answers, yet somehow they make her feel real, not a specimen, not a label, a child. Specialists offer several competing explanations for how frequently different human groups interacted. Some researchers envision rare encounters spread over vast stretches of time. Others believe contact may have been more common in certain regions. The evidence continues to expand, but many details remain hidden beneath layers of earth and lost generations. Perhaps the people themselves would find our categories amusing. You imagine two ancient parents watching children play. Would they have spent much time worrying about species classifications? Probably not. Children tend to be far more interested in sticks, mud, and whatever dangerous object adults have just carefully hidden. Some things truly never change. As shadows shorten and the day warms, the group reaches a river crossing. Water moves around smooth stones with a constant soothing sound. Fish flicker beneath the surface. Tall reeds sway gently in the breeze. People stop here to rest. Some drink. Others repair straps or examine tools. One older member carefully removes a thorn from a younger person's foot. Such a small act. Yet kindness often lives in small acts. Findings from genetic analysis indicate that many modern people still carry traces of Neanderthal ancestry. In parts of Asia and Oceania, Denisovan genetic contributions are also present. These inherited fragments influence aspects of immunity and adaptation, though the full picture remains complex. In a very real sense, ancient meetings left lasting echoes. Their stories did not end completely. They continued quietly inside future generations, inside us. A fascinating observation comes from how recently these discoveries transformed scientific understanding. Only a few decades ago, many researchers assumed ancient human species lived separate stories. DNA analysis revealed something far more complicated and, perhaps, far more beautiful. Connection, blending, shared ancestry. Not perfect separation. The river sparkles beneath the midday sun. Dragonflies skim the surface. Grasshoppers leap from plant to plant. The warmth of the day spreads across your shoulders. You imagine an encounter between two groups. Not dramatic, not violent, just cautious, curious. A shared hunting ground. Mutual observation. Gradually, perhaps trust, perhaps trade, perhaps affection, perhaps love. Human emotions are difficult enough to understand among people sitting in the same room today. Trying to reconstruct emotions from 90,000 years ago requires considerable humility. The scientific picture is still evolving. New discoveries may overturn old assumptions. Fresh evidence may reveal additional encounters. Perhaps entirely unknown groups remain hidden. Perhaps some ancient communities were far more interconnected than anyone suspects. History enjoys surprises, and the deep past seems particularly fond of them. The group resumes its journey. The afternoon breeze carries the scent of flowering plants and wet stone. Clouds drift lazily overhead. Insects hum in the grass. Everything feels calm, normal. And maybe that is the most important lesson. Ancient human relationships were probably not lived as scientific mysteries. They were lived as daily life. Meals shared beside fires. Journeys through valleys. Conversations, arguments, laughter, children, loss, hope, love. A lesser-known discovery reveals that traces of ancient mixing events survive inside people alive today, turning every human body into something of a historical archive. Not a perfect archive, certainly. More like a library where several books have lost their covers and some pages are missing. Still, the stories remain. As evening slowly approaches once more, golden light stretches across the land. The group moves toward another place of shelter. Smoke from the firewood they carry lingers faintly in the air. You glance toward the distant horizon. Somewhere beyond those hills, countless generations have come and gone, separate lives, shared lives. Children born into worlds far more complicated than we once imagined. And perhaps, beneath the same stars now appearing overhead, ancient families gathered close together without realizing they would one day reshape humanity itself. Not through conquest, not through grand monuments, but through something much quieter, through belonging, beneath the slow movement of clouds. Another day begins with surprising gentleness. The mountains are behind you now. The land opens once more into broad valleys stitched together by streams and patches of woodland. Morning mist hangs low above the grass, and tiny droplets sparkle where the first sunlight reaches them. The air feels softer here, warmer, less severe. Around the camp, people rise gradually. Someone tends the embers left from the night before. Someone stretches stiff shoulders. A child rubs sleep from tired eyes and reaches instinctively toward the nearest familiar face. Nearby, a pair of ravens argue noisily from the branches above, sounding oddly offended by the existence of one another. Some things, apparently, are timeless. You walk beside the group as they make their way toward a stand of hazel trees. Fallen leaves crunch softly underfoot. A faint smell of damp moss rises from the earth. Somewhere in the distance, water trickles over stone with its usual calm persistence, and as the valley awakens around you, your thoughts begin to settle on another question. If different kinds of humans shared this world, how different were their minds? For generations, many people assumed that intelligence belonged entirely to modern humans. Other species were often portrayed as simpler beings, driven only by instinct. Yet the evidence uncovered over recent decades has painted a more complicated picture. You kneel beside a fallen log while members of the group gather edible plants and examine signs left by animals during the night. Life here depends on memory, where certain roots grow, when berries ripen, which valleys flood after heavy rain, where dangerous predators are likely to appear. Knowledge is survival, and knowledge must be passed on. Excavations from numerous prehistoric sites suggest that ancient humans possessed sophisticated traditions that endured for countless generations. Stoneworking techniques remained consistent. Hunting strategies were refined. Fire was maintained and transported. Materials were selected with care. None of this happens by accident. It requires observation, teaching, patience, and perhaps something deeper, culture. The word itself feels almost too modern. People often associate culture with libraries, symphonies, or museums. Yet culture, at its heart, simply means shared ways of living. And even in this ancient world, shared habits seem to surround you everywhere. The shape of tools, the choice of campsites, the preparation of hides, the treatment of food, the gestures exchanged between people, the routines repeated season after season. You notice an older woman showing a younger member of the group how to prepare fibers from plants. Her movements are slow and practiced. No hurry, no frustration, just repetition and quiet correction. The lesson itself may be ordinary, but ordinary lessons are what build civilizations. Hidden among the evidence is an intriguing clue. Certain stone technologies appear to have remained remarkably stable over enormous periods of time in some regions. Similar methods persisted for tens of thousands of years, which means prehistoric elders occasionally had opportunities to complain that young people no longer appreciated proper techniques. Human continuity can be strangely comforting. The day grows warmer, sunlight filters through branches overhead, insects hum among wildflowers, the scent of crushed grass rises beneath your feet as the group rests beside a stream. You watch reflections ripple across the surface. Water has no memory, yet people do, and memory changes everything. Several interpretations have been proposed regarding the cognitive differences between Homo sapiens and other ancient humans. Some specialists emphasize the possibility of unique symbolic abilities among modern humans. Others argue that the distinctions may have been smaller than previously believed. The surviving traces allow more than one possibility, which is perhaps fitting. Minds leave fewer fossils than bones. You pick up a smooth stone from the riverbank and turn it in your hand. A simple object, yet someone long ago may have done exactly the same thing, examined it, considered its shape, imagined what it could become. Imagination itself is difficult to excavate. No skeleton preserves dreams. No cave sediment records a joke. No fragment of bone tells you what stories parents whisper to children beside the fire. And still, hints remain. There is also an easily overlooked detail found in some prehistoric sites. Certain objects appear to have travelled surprisingly long distances. Materials from one region sometimes show up hundreds of kilometres away. Perhaps people carried them personally. Perhaps they exchanged them. Perhaps information moved alongside objects. Whatever the explanation, ancient landscapes may have been more connected than they first appear. Today we can send messages across continents in seconds. Back then, ideas travelled at the speed of walking, which admittedly makes online shopping somewhat inconvenient. Still, information moved, knowledge spread. People learned from one another, and perhaps different species learned from one another as well. Nearby, one of the children begins experimenting with floating leaves in the stream. Another joins in. Soon they are entirely absorbed in determining which leaf makes the best tiny boat. Scientific curiosity, apparently, often begins with getting distracted. You smile quietly and continue walking. The afternoon light becomes golden as clouds drift lazily overhead. Grass sways in the breeze. Dragonflies flash above pools of water. The world feels peaceful enough that it is difficult to imagine how much mystery surrounds these ancient lives. Not every archaeologist sees the matter in the same way. Some researchers believe symbolic behaviour expanded dramatically with Homo sapiens. Others point toward discoveries among Neanderthals that suggest more complex mental worlds than once assumed. Pigments, decorated objects, feathers, possible ornaments. The picture remains incomplete. Yet perhaps completeness is overrated. After all, modern humans misunderstand one another constantly, despite living side by side and possessing written languages, smartphones, and endless opportunities to argue on the internet. Expecting perfect understanding across 100,000 years may be asking a little too much. As shadows lengthen across the landscape, the group begins preparing for another evening. Wood is gathered, water collected, food arranged. The familiar rhythm returns once more. You help carry branches back toward camp. Smoke rises into the cooling air. Birdsong softens. The western sky turns shades of amber and violet, and while the first stars begin appearing overhead, you find yourself imagining another camp somewhere beyond the hills, another fire, another circle of faces, perhaps Neanderthal, perhaps Denisovan, perhaps a people whose name has not yet been discovered. Their conversations are lost, their songs are silent, their laughter no longer echoes, but perhaps their thoughts were not so different from your own. Perhaps they worried, perhaps they wondered, perhaps they dreamed strange dreams, perhaps they gazed upward at the same stars and asked questions no one could answer. Questions about life, questions about death, questions about tomorrow, questions about themselves. Because curiosity may be one of humanity's oldest companions, and perhaps, long ago, it belonged not to one species alone, but to several, all sharing this vast and beautiful world together. While the valley grows quiet beneath the fading colours of evening, the camp slowly settles into its familiar pattern. Wood crackles softly in the fire. The smell of roasted meat and smoke drifts upward into the cooling air. Tiny sparks rise and vanish among the first stars. A breeze passes through the grass, carrying with it the scent of damp earth and distant water. You sit close to the warmth and pull your covering tighter around your shoulders. Night has a way of slowing everything. Conversations become softer. Movements become gentler. Even thoughts seem to wander more slowly beneath the endless sky. And perhaps that is why your mind turns towards something that has puzzled researchers for generations. Language, not written language, not books, not poetry carved into stone, something much older. Simple voices exchanged beside a fire like this one, because if different kinds of humans shared the world for thousands upon thousands of years, an obvious question quietly emerges. Did they speak? And if they did, what did their voices sound like? The question itself feels strangely intimate. Bones can tell you about height. Teeth can reveal diet. DNA can uncover family connections, but voices vanish almost immediately after they are spoken. They leave no footprints, no ash layers, no skeletons, and yet language shapes everything. Without it, knowledge becomes difficult to preserve. Without it, cooperation becomes harder. Without it, stories disappear before they are born. You listen to the sounds around the camp. Someone laughs quietly. Two people exchange short remarks while preparing food. A child asks something in a curious tone. An elder answers patiently. The exact words mean little to you, but the rhythm feels familiar, comfortingly familiar. Excavations and anatomical studies have provided strong evidence that Neanderthals possessed many physical features associated with speech. Their hearing capabilities, breathing control, and the famous hyoid bone discovered in some specimens suggest that spoken communication was entirely possible. Exactly how complex that communication may have been remains uncertain. But the old image of silent, grunting creatures has become increasingly difficult to defend. Frankly, history has not always been kind to Neanderthals. First they were portrayed as dim, then dirty, then incapable of culture, and now. One discovery after another keeps forcing modern researchers to apologize on behalf of earlier assumptions. Science can be wonderfully humbling. You glance upward. Above the camp, the stars are multiplying. Constellations begin to emerge from the darkness. Their light has travelled unimaginable distances, arriving quietly while people below continue preparing for sleep. A small but intriguing clue comes from genetics. Modern humans possess a version of a gene known as FOXP2, associated with aspects of speech and language. Interestingly, Neanderthals appear to have shared important similarities in this gene. Of course, genes alone cannot tell us whether someone enjoyed jokes or complained about cold weather, but they hint that the roots of language may stretch deeper than once believed. Nearby, a young child struggles to imitate an older person's movements while twisting plant fibers together. The child becomes frustrated. The older woman smiles and demonstrates the process again, patiently, slowly, repeating the same motions. Teaching depends on communication, and communication depends on shared understanding. Perhaps gestures came first, perhaps sounds, perhaps both evolved together. No single explanation has satisfied everyone studying the origins of language. Some specialists imagine a gradual process extending over immense spans of time. Others propose important leaps in complexity. New discoveries continue to reshape the discussion. The truth may ultimately prove far more complicated than any simple theory, and perhaps much stranger. You stretch your hands toward the fire, its warmth reaches your fingers immediately. Behind you, darkness deepens among the trees. The forest sounds different at night. Branches creak softly. Insects sing, somewhere far away. An owl calls into the darkness. The world feels peaceful, yet voices may have filled nights like these for hundreds of thousands of years. Voices now completely lost. That thought carries a certain sadness and a certain beauty. An unexpected detail emerged from studies of modern languages around the world. Human speech can vary enormously while still expressing the same emotions, needs, and ideas. Thousands of languages exist today, each with different sounds and structures. If one species can produce such astonishing variety. Imagine what ancient conversations across several human species might have sounded like. Different rhythms, different tones, different accents, perhaps entirely different ways of organizing thought. Today we occasionally struggle to understand people from neighboring countries. Ancient encounters may have required extraordinary patience, or perhaps everyone simply pointed at things until it worked. Which, to be fair, still solves a surprising number of problems. The fire burns lower. People settle onto bedding made from hides and grasses. Shadows flicker across tired faces. The smell of smoke clings to everything. You notice how much communication occurs without words. A hand placed gently on a shoulder, a nod, a smile, someone passing food, someone adjusting a sleeping child's covering. Meaning exists in gestures too. Not every researcher interprets the evidence in the same way. Some argue that modern humans possessed linguistic advantages that contributed to their eventual success. Others caution that we may underestimate the capabilities of ancient relatives because spoken words leave so few traces behind. The deeper investigators look, the less certain easy answers become. Perhaps certainty is not the goal. Perhaps understanding requires accepting mystery. After all, even today, language remains astonishing. Air vibrates, sounds emerge, thought becomes voice, voice becomes memory, memory becomes tradition, tradition becomes history, and history carries itself across generations. The camp grows quieter, one by one. Conversations fade. The stars shine brighter. The moon rises slowly above distant hills, bathing the landscape in pale silver light. You imagine another fire beyond the darkness, another circle of people, perhaps Neanderthal, perhaps Denisovan, perhaps a group entirely unknown. Children there ask questions, parents answer, stories are shared, warnings are given, laughter spreads, songs rise softly into the night. And though those sounds disappeared long ago, perhaps they were every bit as rich and meaningful as the voices surrounding you now. Because the desire to communicate may be among humanity's oldest gifts, not belonging to one species alone, but shared. Passed from voice to voice, from parent to child, from friend to friend, from one firelit evening to the next, until eventually, after countless generations, those ancient echoes would reach the ears of people not yet imagined, people lying comfortably beneath blankets, listening quietly in the night, wondering about the voices that came before, with dawn spreading quietly across the valley. You awaken to the soft sounds of another ordinary morning in the ancient world. Mist lingers above the stream. Moisture clings to the grass. The fire from the previous evening has settled into glowing patches beneath a layer of pale ash, and someone is already crouching beside it, carefully feeding thin twigs into the embers. Soon. Smoke rises once again. Its familiar scent drifts through the camp. Birdsong begins gradually. A breeze stirs the leaves overhead, and somewhere far away, hidden beyond forests and hills, another group may be greeting the same sunrise. Perhaps Neanderthal, perhaps Denisovan, perhaps people whose existence remains unknown to modern science. Because one question still hovers quietly over the story of humanity. Were there even more human species sharing the world with us? The possibility itself feels almost unbelievable, after all. Modern life often encourages neat categories and simple family trees. Reality, however, rarely cooperates, and ancient history appears to have been wonderfully untidy. As you follow the others toward the riverbank, the cool air brushes your skin. Small fish flash beneath the water's surface. Insects hover above patches of reeds. The landscape seems peaceful, though beneath that peaceful surface lies an enormous amount of hidden time. Over the last century, discoveries have accumulated that transformed our understanding of human evolution. Species once unknown have gradually emerged through fossils, DNA studies, and careful excavations. Each new find has added another branch to an already complicated family tree. Yet researchers increasingly suspect that some branches may still be missing. You kneel beside the water and scoop up a handful. It is icy cold. Tiny ripples spread outward before disappearing again. Human history can feel much the same. A small clue appears. Waves spread through scientific understanding. Then new mysteries emerge. Not long ago, many experts believed they had identified most major human relatives. Then Denisovans appeared almost unexpectedly. Their discovery served as a gentle reminder. Nature does not reveal all of its secrets at once. Curiously enough, some of the most exciting evidence comes from places where bones are scarce. Tiny fragments of DNA preserved in ancient sediments have begun to reveal traces of populations that left few visible remains behind. Entire groups may have existed without leaving complete skeletons. An extraordinary thought. People who laughed, people who worried, people who raised children, people who vanished so thoroughly that only microscopic clues survived. History can be astonishingly delicate. The morning grows warmer. Sunlight spreads across the valley floor, dragonflies skim above the water. Nearby, a child becomes fascinated by a beetle making its determined journey across a flat stone. Priorities have remained fairly consistent throughout human existence. Food, warmth, family, and occasionally becoming completely absorbed by insects. You continue along the stream while older members of the group inspect tracks pressed into damp soil. Every mark tells a story. Deer, foxes, rabbits, birds, and perhaps, long ago, the footprints of other human species crossing the same ground. What scientists have pieced together suggests that the story of human evolution resembles a braided river rather than a straight line. Branches split apart, overlap, reconnect, and disappear. Some groups survived for immense spans of time. Others seem to have emerged and vanished with surprising speed. The picture is complicated, beautifully complicated, and far from complete. An observation that surprised researchers involved fossils discovered in the Philippines, Indonesia, and other parts of Asia. Several unusual finds suggest that human diversity in these regions may have been greater than anyone previously imagined. Names like Homo floresiensis and Homo luzonensis entered the scientific conversation relatively recently. Small-bodied humans, unexpected combinations of traits, puzzles waiting patiently inside caves. It almost feels unfair. Just when scientists begin organizing the shelves, prehistory quietly delivers another box marked good luck. The river bends toward a grassy meadow. Wildflowers sway in the wind. Clouds drift lazily overhead. Everything appears calm, yet beneath the earth. Countless stories remain hidden. Even now, the question refuses to settle into a simple answer. Some investigators believe additional species or populations are waiting to be identified. Others caution that fragmentary evidence can be difficult to interpret. New discoveries have often complicated matters rather than simplified them, which, in truth, makes the search all the more fascinating. Because uncertainty is not failure. Uncertainty is an invitation. It encourages patience, humility, curiosity, qualities that ancient people themselves likely depended upon every day. As midday approaches, everyone rests beneath the shade of several trees. The smell of crushed grass mixes with warm earth. A gentle breeze cools your face. Someone repairs a carrying strap. Another person sharpens a stone edge. Nearby, 2 children argue passionately over something involving sticks. No civilization. No written laws, and yet debates continue. Human consistency truly is impressive. Hidden in the background of these discoveries is a humbling realization. Modern humans are the last survivors, not the first humans, not the only humans who ever existed. The last. For hundreds of thousands of years, multiple forms of humanity shared the planet. Different bodies, different histories, different traditions, different ways of experiencing the world. Today, we stand alone. But for most of prehistory, loneliness was not our condition. Company was. The afternoon light softens. Cloud shadows travel slowly across distant hills. The stream continues its endless conversation with stone, and you find yourself wondering what those lost people would think if they could see the modern world. Towering cities, airplanes, electric lights, millions of voices travelling instantly across oceans. Perhaps they would be amazed, perhaps confused, perhaps mostly interested in whether anyone planned to share dinner. Certain questions remain beautifully unresolved. How many human species truly existed? How often did they meet? How much did they understand one another? The answers remain hidden, at least for now. And perhaps somewhere beneath an untouched hillside, or inside a cave no one has entered in thousands of years, another clue waits patiently in the darkness, not in any hurry. Content asleep beneath layers of earth while rivers flow, forests grow, and generations come and go. Eventually, evening begins its slow return. Smoke rises from the camp. The scent of roasting food drifts into the cooling air. Above, the first stars quietly emerge, and beneath their ancient light, you settle beside the fire once more, surrounded by companions, while the mysteries of countless forgotten relatives remain scattered across the world, waiting patiently for someone to listen. As evening shadows gather beneath the trees, the camp gradually settles into a slower rhythm once again. The day's work is nearly finished. Wood has been collected, water containers have been filled, food rests beside the fire, releasing comforting aromas into the cool air. Smoke rises upward in lazy ribbons, disappearing into a sky that shifts from pale blue to shades of amber and violet. You sit close to the warmth and listen. Branches crackle softly. Someone scrapes a hide with steady movements. Children whisper to one another before sleep overtakes their curiosity. Far above, the first stars appear, and under those stars, your thoughts drift toward another mystery. Not bones, not tools, not even language, but belief. Because at some point in humanity's long story, people began seeing the world as something more than rivers, animals, weather, and stone. Meaning emerged, symbols emerged, questions emerged. Questions that remain with us even now. You look into the flames. Firelight dances across faces. Shadows stretch and bend along the ground. The changing light creates strange shapes among the surrounding trees. For a moment, a branch resembles an antler. A rock appears almost human. The world itself seems alive with suggestion. Perhaps ancient people noticed such things too. Perhaps they always had, over many decades. discoveries from prehistoric sites have encouraged scientists to consider the possibility that symbolic behavior developed earlier and more broadly than once imagined. Pigments, ornaments, engravings, and carefully selected objects suggest that ancient humans may have assigned special meanings to certain things. Exactly what those meanings were remains elusive, but meaning itself appears to have mattered. You lie back and watch sparks rise toward the darkening sky. The stars seem impossibly numerous, without city lights. The heavens stretch endlessly above you, bright rivers of light, patterns among the constellations, slowly moving planets, to night. They appear calm and familiar, yet to ancient eyes, they may have inspired wonder or comfort or fear, or perhaps all three. Interestingly, a seemingly ordinary find turned out to be important. Pieces of red ochre discovered across many prehistoric sites indicate that colour held significance for ancient people. This mineral pigment may have been used for decoration, practical purposes, body painting, or rituals whose meanings have long since vanished. Colour itself may have carried emotional weight, even today. Humans surround themselves with colours that comfort, celebrate, or remember. Some habits reach astonishing distances into the past. Nearby, an elder adjusts a necklace made from shells and animal teeth. The ornaments catch the firelight, producing tiny flashes that appear and disappear with every movement. Simple, beautiful, personal. No one alive today knows exactly what such objects represented. Perhaps status, perhaps family, perhaps memory, perhaps affection. Human beings have always been skilled at attaching enormous emotional importance to small objects. Entire museums exist because someone, somewhere, decided not to throw something away. The night grows deeper, owls begin calling in the distance, insects sing among the grass. The smell of pine mingles with smoke and roasted meat. Everything feels calm, almost timeless. An unusual aspect that often escapes attention concerns feathers. Archaeological evidence from some Neanderthal sites suggests that certain birds may have been selected not for food, but for their feathers or claws. Such choices have led some researchers to wonder whether ornamentation and symbolism extended beyond modern humans. Not everyone agrees with these interpretations, yet the possibility remains fascinating because beauty itself may have mattered, and beauty is difficult to measure with scientific instruments. There is still room for more than one interpretation. Some investigators see strong evidence for symbolic thinking among multiple human species. Others prefer more cautious explanations, emphasizing practical uses and warning against reading too much into limited evidence. The question remains surprisingly difficult to settle, perhaps because symbols are deeply personal. Even among modern people, one object may carry profound meaning while appearing entirely ordinary to someone else. The fire settles lower, shadows lengthen, conversation becomes softer. A child nearby has fallen asleep while leaning against a parent's shoulder. Someone gently lifts the sleeping figure and wraps them more securely in hides. No words are needed, care itself speaks clearly. You notice the moon climbing above the trees. Its pale light spreads across the valley floor. Streams reflect silver. Grass sways softly in the breeze. And suddenly it becomes easy to understand why ancient people might have sensed mystery in the world around them. Storms arrived unexpectedly. The moon changed shape. Seasons transformed entire landscapes. Animals migrated and vanished. The stars shifted slowly through the year. Life itself must have felt filled with hidden patterns. Perhaps questions naturally followed. Why does winter come? Why do people dream? Why do loved ones die? Why do stars move? Questions without obvious answers. Questions that every generation inherits, curiously. One of the oldest known examples of abstract engravings consists of simple lines carved into objects. At first glance, the marks appear unremarkable. yet they suggest that someone intentionally created patterns whose importance extended beyond immediate survival. A remarkable idea, because survival alone does not explain art or music or stories or memories. Something deeper seems to be involved, something wonderfully human, and perhaps not exclusively human. The deeper researchers look, the more nuanced the picture becomes. Evidence once thought unique to Homo sapiens has occasionally appeared in association with Neanderthals and other groups. Each new discovery forces scientists to reconsider old assumptions and approach the past with greater humility. Humility may be one of history's greatest lessons. The modern world often rewards certainty. Ancient history rewards patience. As midnight approaches, the camp becomes very quiet. The fire burns low. Most people are asleep. Only a few figures remain awake, staring silently into the embers. You listen to the river beyond the trees. Its gentle sound blends with the distant rustling of leaves. The air feels colder now, fresh, peaceful, and somewhere beyond the horizon, beneath other skies and beside other rivers. Forgotten people once sat around forgotten fires asking questions no one recorded. Perhaps they wondered where dreams came from. Perhaps they spoke to the stars. Perhaps they gave names to mountains. Perhaps they carried stories that lived for generations before disappearing forever. Their beliefs are mostly lost. Their ceremonies are silent. Their voices no longer reach us. Yet traces remain. A shell, a feather, a pigment, a pattern carved into stone. Tiny clues, quiet clues, enough to suggest that long before Scythian temples and written myths, human minds were already searching for meaning beneath the night sky, just as you are now. In the soft silence before sunrise, the world feels almost suspended between sleep and waking. The moon still hangs low above the western hills. A few stubborn stars remain visible overhead, though their light is beginning to fade. Mist curls above the stream beyond the camp, and the air carries the familiar mixture of cold earth, damp grass, and the lingering scent of last night's fire. Nearby, embers glow beneath grey ash. Someone stirs. Someone coughs softly. A child murmurs in sleep and turns beneath a hide covering. Life moves slowly here. No clocks, no schedules, no distant traffic, only the gradual arrival of another day as you sit beside the quiet fire. Your thoughts drift toward a mystery that has troubled people for generations. Not how ancient humans lived, not how they hunted, not how they made tools, but why. After surviving for hundreds of thousands of years, they disappeared because something happened. The world that once held many kinds of humans eventually became home to only one, us, and despite decades of research, the exact reasons remain surprisingly difficult to untangle. The eastern sky brightens. Birds begin calling among the branches. Thin columns of smoke rise once more as the camp awakens. You walk toward the stream while others prepare for the day. The water flows steadily over rounded stones, producing the same soothing sound you have come to know so well. It is easy to imagine this landscape continuing forever, but nothing in nature remains unchanged. Climate shifts, animals migrate, forests expand, glaciers advance, rivers alter their courses, and people adapt, or fail to adapt. When evidence from different regions is compared, a broad pattern emerges. Around 40,000 years ago, Neanderthals gradually disappeared from the archaeological record. Yet this disappearance was not sudden. It unfolded over thousands of years, varying from one region to another. There was no single final day, no dramatic ending, no last farewell. History often unfolds quietly, and endings can be surprisingly gradual. A breeze moves through the trees, carrying the scent of pine resin and damp moss. Sunlight reaches the valley floor, warming the grass and sending insects into the air. The world seems peaceful, But Ice Age environments were never completely stable. Temperatures fluctuated, rainfall changed, food sources shifted. Entire ecosystems transformed over generations. Ancient people had to respond continually. Adaptation was not optional. It was life itself, oddly enough. Some of the most valuable clues came from tiny chemical signatures preserved inside cave deposits, ice cores, and ancient sediments. These records reveal periods of dramatic climatic change that ancient populations experienced: cold phases, warmer intervals, changing landscapes, shifting prey animals. Nature itself was constantly rewriting the rules, and surviving those changes required flexibility. You kneel beside the stream and watch leaves drift downstream. Some catch on rocks, some continue onward. Some spin briefly in circles before finding open water again. Perhaps ancient populations faced similar challenges. Some adapted, some moved, some merged with neighbouring groups, some vanished. Several explanations have been proposed over the years. Climate change, competition for resources, disease, small population sizes, and interbreeding have all been suggested as contributing factors. Increasingly, researchers suspect that no single cause tells the entire story. Life rarely offers simple explanations, and neither does extinction. You continue walking through a meadow where wildflowers sway in the morning breeze. Bees move from blossom to blossom. A pair of rabbits disappear into the undergrowth. Everything feels alive. Yet absence itself can leave traces. The remains left behind paint a picture of shrinking populations. In some areas, Neanderthal communities became increasingly isolated. Smaller populations can face serious challenges, fewer connections, reduced genetic diversity, greater vulnerability to sudden environmental changes, and perhaps greater loneliness. Loneliness is not something easily measured in fossils, but isolation leaves consequences. A small detail, almost accidental, would later prove significant. Genetic studies have shown that traces of Neanderthal ancestry survive within modern humans, which means that disappearance does not necessarily mean complete erasure. Some Neanderthals may not have vanished entirely. Instead, they became part of something larger, part of future generations, part of us. The idea feels strangely comforting. Not extinction in the absolute sense, transformation, continuation, a quieter kind of survival by midday. The camp rests beneath a shade of trees. People share food. Children play with sticks and stones. Someone repairs a broken carrying strap. Someone else sharpens a tool beside the stream. Simple moments, ordinary moments. And perhaps ordinary moments are what history most often consists of. Not grand events, not famous battles, not dramatic speeches, just countless days much like this one. Fresh discoveries have only deepened the mystery. Some scientists emphasize environmental pressures, others focus on demographic challenges. Still others point to the possibility that cultural differences influence survival. No explanation has yet managed to convince everyone, and perhaps none ever will. The truth may lie in the combination of many small forces acting together over enormous stretches of time, just as rivers shape valleys not through one great flood, but through endless patient movement. The afternoon sun casts long shadows across the grass. Clouds drift overhead. Dragonflies skim above pools of water. Everything appears calm. And perhaps it often was. Modern imagination sometimes seeks dramatic endings. But ancient lives were not stories designed for audiences. People woke up, gathered food, raised children, sat beside fires, told stories, loved one another, and eventually, without realizing it. Some communities became the last of their kind. No speeches, no announcements, no awareness that history was closing a chapter. An observation that surprised researchers involved the timing of human coexistence. Homo sapiens and Neanderthals may have shared parts of Eurasia for thousands of years. Generations lived and died while both species occupied the same world. Long enough for encounters, long enough for exchange, long enough for memories, perhaps long enough for friendships, long enough for love. As evening begins to return, golden sunlight spreads across the valley, smoke rises from the camp, the smell of roasting food drifts through the cooling air. The familiar routines continue, and you find yourself thinking about those final Neanderthal communities. Did they know their numbers were shrinking? Probably not. Did they understand they would become the last? Almost certainly not. They simply lived, as humans always have, one season after another, one fire after another, one sunrise after another, until eventually their voices grew quiet, not erased, not forgotten, simply distant. And as darkness settles gently over the land once more, the stars above shine with the same calm indifference they offered to Neanderthals, Denisovans, and Homo sapiens alike, silent witnesses to countless beginnings and countless endings. Beneath the pale afternoon sky, the valley stretches peacefully in every direction. Summer grasses sway gently beneath the breeze. Insects hum lazily among patches of wildflowers. Thin clouds drift overhead with no sense of urgency. And beyond the hills, unseen rivers continue their endless journeys toward places no one in the camp has ever visited. The warmth of the day lingers pleasantly on your skin. Nearby, smoke rises from the cooking fire in soft curls, carrying the familiar smell of wood and roasted roots. Someone hums quietly while scraping hide. Children crouch beside the stream, entirely absorbed in a complicated disagreement involving pebbles and sticks. Civilization has not yet appeared, but passionate arguments over trivial matters are clearly much older. You sit beneath the shade of an old tree and allow your thoughts to wander. The story you have followed through these long days and quiet evenings has been filled with mysteries, unknown species, ancient encounters, lost voices, forgotten beliefs. Yet one question remains. Why are you here, not you personally? Perhaps, though that is an entirely different conversation best reserved for another evening. No, the larger question. Why did Homo sapiens survive when so many relatives disappeared? Piece by piece, the picture has slowly become clearer, though not completely. The answer appears to involve a remarkable combination of flexibility, cooperation, innovation, and perhaps no small amount of luck. Luck, after all, deserves more respect than history books sometimes grant it. Entire civilizations have depended upon being in the right place at the right time, or avoiding being in the wrong place at the wrong time, which sounds suspiciously similar to modern traffic. You rise and walk toward the stream. Sunlight dances across the surface, breaking into countless fragments. Dragonflies flash like tiny jewels above the water. The smell of wet stone and flowering plants fills the air. Nothing in the landscape suggests that history itself is unfolding, and that is because history rarely announces itself for the people around you. This day feels ordinary. Gather food, repair tools, watch children, prepare for tomorrow, simple routines. Yet simple routines, repeated over countless generations, shape the future, across caves, campsites, and forgotten valleys. Similar signs appear again and again. Homo sapiens occupied an extraordinary range of environments: forests, deserts, grasslands, mountains, frozen tundra. Adaptability became one of humanity's greatest strengths. Not because humans were physically superior in every situation, far from it. Compared with bears, humans are unimpressive. Compared with wolves, we're rather slow. Compared with eagles, embarrassingly poor at flying. Although perhaps it is unfair to compare ourselves to eagles. Very few creatures can claim excellence in aviation. What humans possessed was flexibility, the ability to learn the ability to cooperate, the ability to share information, and above all, the ability to change. As the afternoon slowly unfolds, several people from the camp begin preparing for a hunting expedition. Others remain behind. An older woman teaches younger members how to work fibers. Someone sharpens a stone edge with practiced patience. No individual knows everything. No individual has to. Knowledge itself lives inside the group, and that may have mattered enormously. Some answers have emerged only recently. Studies of social networks among prehistoric communities suggest that larger and more interconnected populations may have provided advantages. Information could spread, new techniques could be shared, resources might be exchanged during difficult periods. Communities became safety nets, and safety nets save lives. Few people realize that seashells discovered far inland sometimes reveal surprisingly extensive connections between groups. Objects traveled enormous distances, even in prehistoric times. Ideas probably traveled with them. A useful technique, a story, perhaps news about dangerous animals, possibly complaints about neighbors. Human beings have always enjoyed exchanging information. Sometimes useful information, sometimes less useful information. You pause beneath a grove of trees where sunlight filters through the branches. The smell of pine resin hangs in the air. A squirrel darts across the ground and disappears into the undergrowth with astonishing confidence. Confidence that seems entirely unsupported by its size. Nature can be wonderfully optimistic. Time has preserved just enough clues to suggest that creativity played an important role in human survival. Diverse tools appear, new materials are adopted, hunting methods evolve, shelters improve, clothing becomes more effective. Innovation did not happen all at once. It accumulated, slowly, patiently, generation after generation, a child observing an elder remembering what their parents once taught, knowledge passing quietly through time. As the sun moves lower, golden light spreads across the valley, shadows lengthen, birdsong softens, the camp begins preparing for evening, smoke drifts lazily upward into the cooling air. One seemingly minor discovery reshaped the conversation surrounding human adaptability. Evidence from ancient genetics suggests that modern humans inherited useful traits from other species through interbreeding. Genes related to immunity, genes influencing adaptation, helpful gifts from ancient relatives, which means the story is not one of complete victory, nor complete replacement. It is a story of connection, a story of blending, a story in which survival itself became a shared achievement. Even after decades of study, the matter remains open. Some scientists emphasize social complexity. Others focus on environmental adaptability. Still others point toward population size or cultural innovation. The answer may ultimately involve several factors working together. Life often prefers combinations over simplicity, which can be frustrating for anyone hoping for a neat conclusion. Fortunately, neat conclusions are somewhat overrated. The evening sky begins changing colour. Amber, rose, soft violet. The stream reflects the fading light while insects continue singing in the tall grass. The first stars appear above the distant hills, and while the camp settles around another fire, you find yourself considering how fragile survival truly is. Had circumstances been slightly different, perhaps another species would have endured. Perhaps Neanderthals would be telling stories beside electric lamps. Perhaps Homo sapiens would be known only through fragments of bone. History balances on surprisingly narrow paths, yet here you are, listening, wondering, remembering relatives whose names were forgotten long before written language existed. And perhaps the greatest lesson hidden within their story is not superiority, not triumph, not conquest, but humility. Because survival was never guaranteed. It was a gift passed through thousands upon thousands of uncertain years, a gift carried through ice ages and changing climates, through countless ordinary mornings, through quiet evenings beside fires, through generations who never knew they were preserving the future, until eventually, beneath the patient stars above, their long journey became yours, under the patient stars above. Another night slowly gives way to morning. Darkness retreats without haste. The moon fades toward the western hills. A pale silver glow spreads across the eastern sky, revealing outlines of trees, distant ridges, and the familiar shapes of sleeping figures gathered around the remains of the fire. The embers still breathe faint warmth into the cool air. Smoke lingers in clothing. Dew rests upon the grass. The world feels quiet enough that even the soft murmur of the nearby stream seems unusually clear. You pull your covering around your shoulders and sit for a while before the camp begins to stir. These peaceful moments before sunrise have become familiar companions, and as often happens during quiet hours, your thoughts wander, not toward the distant past this time, but toward the future, or rather, toward the future that ancient people could never imagine, because although countless human relatives vanished, the story did not end. It simply continued, generation after generation, season after season, until eventually, entirely new worlds emerged, cities, empires, ships, libraries, observatories, machines, and one day, people would study the bones of their ancestors while drinking coffee and complaining about internet connections. History has a sense of humour. Nearby, someone feeds dry twigs into the fire. Tiny sparks rise into the fading darkness. A child awakens and immediately begins asking questions. Children, you notice, seem wonderfully committed to beginning every morning with curiosity. Perhaps that too is an ancient inheritance. As the sky brightens, birds begin calling from the branches overhead. The smell of pine needles mixes with the scent of wood smoke. Cool air brushes your face. Life resumes its familiar rhythms, and through those rhythms, humanity slowly changes, although much has been lost. Enough remains to reveal a remarkable truth. Human evolution did not stop when Neanderthals disappeared. Bodies continued changing, cultures continued changing, ideas continued changing. Even today, humanity remains part of nature's long story. Evolution has no final chapter, only chapters still being written. You walk toward the stream and kneel beside the water. Smooth stones shine beneath the surface. Tiny fish dart between patches of shadow and sunlight. The water flows onward without hesitation. And time behaves much the same way. Generations pass, memories fade, new stories emerge. No one around you realizes what lies ahead. Agriculture, writing, music preserved in symbols, libraries filled with knowledge, glass windows, railways, spacecraft, all impossible dreams. And yet every extraordinary future begins with ordinary people. People like these. People who gather firewood. People who comfort children. People who share food and stories. The foundation of civilization was built long before civilization itself existed. Strangely, one of the most revealing clues came from the remarkable continuity found in human behavior. Across immense stretches of time, certain patterns repeat themselves again and again: families, friendships, cooperation, curiosity, humor, hope. Technologies change, clothing changes, languages change, but much of the human experience remains astonishingly familiar, which is comforting and occasionally slightly alarming, because apparently our ancestors also worried, argued, and misplaced important objects. Some traditions endure with remarkable determination. The warmth of late morning spreads through the valley. Insects hum among the flowers. Clouds drift lazily across the blue sky. Several people repair tools while others prepare food. Children invent games whose rules appear entirely mysterious to adults. Nothing seems extraordinary, and yet extraordinary futures depend upon moments exactly like these, little by little. Researchers have assembled a surprisingly detailed portrait of ancient lives. The deeper the record is examined, the more continuity becomes visible. Emotional bonds, cooperation, adaptability, creativity, qualities that helped ancient communities survive, continue to shape modern societies. Though admittedly modern societies contain considerably more paperwork, an easily missed finding turned out to be important. Genetic evidence shows that many adaptations inherited from ancient populations continue influencing human health today. Traits connected with immunity, responses to environmental conditions, small biological gifts carried across immense stretches of time. Ancient relatives continue to travel with us. Quiet companions hidden within our cells, not ghosts, not memories, something even more remarkable. Inheritance by midday. Sunlight sparkles across the stream. Dragonflies move like tiny flashes of blue and green. Warm breezes carry the scent of grass and flowering plants. The valley feels peaceful, not because life is easy, but because life continues. And continuity possesses its own kind of beauty. Some questions are easier to ask than to resolve. Scientists continue investigating how modern humans may evolve in the future. Technology, medicine, migration, and changing environments all introduce fascinating possibilities. No one knows exactly what lies ahead, and perhaps that uncertainty is appropriate. After all, Neanderthals could not imagine satellites. Denisovans could not imagine libraries. Ancient hunters could not imagine airplanes. And perhaps we ourselves are equally limited. Future generations may look back upon our own age with the same mixture of curiosity and amusement. They may wonder why we worried so much, why we rushed so constantly, why we spent so much time staring at glowing rectangles. Though to be fair, some glowing rectangles do contain videos about ancient history, which seems perfectly respectable. As afternoon drifts toward evening, long shadows stretch across the grasslands. Birds settle into the trees. Smoke rises once again above the camp. The familiar cycle repeats. Fire, food, stories, rest. One day becomes another. One season follows the last, and somewhere inside those endless repetitions, humanity slowly transformed itself, not through sudden miracles, not through grand plans, but through countless ordinary lives, lives mostly forgotten, lives rarely celebrated, lives that nevertheless carried the future forward. The western sky glows softly now, amber and violet colours spread above distant hills. The first evening stars begin to appear. You settle beside the fire and listen to its gentle crackling. And as darkness gathers around the camp once more, a simple truth becomes clear. The people surrounding you never knew how important they were. They never imagined the civilizations to come. They never suspected that tens of thousands of years later, someone lying comfortably beneath blankets would be listening to their story. Yet without them, none of it would exist. Not the cities, not the books, not the questions, not even this quiet moment beneath the stars. Their journey became your journey, and yours, in turn, will become someone else's, as it always has, as it always will, as cool air settles across the grasslands. Another evening slowly unfolds beneath skies untouched by artificial light. The day's warmth lingers among the stones, though the breeze already carries hints of approaching night. Long shadows stretch across the valley floor. Grass whispers softly as it bends beneath the wind. Above, thin clouds drift peacefully across a sky that deepens from gold to violet. Nearby, embers pulse beneath fresh wood. The scent of smoke mingles with roasted roots and damp earth. Someone hums quietly, someone laughs. Children continue playing despite several adults insisting that it's nearly time to sleep. Human negotiations with bedtime, you notice. appear to have a very long history. You settle close to the fire while the stars begin appearing overhead, and as darkness gathers around the camp once more, your thoughts turn toward a curious possibility. What if modern humans are not entirely alone? Not physically, not biologically, but genetically. Because while the bodies of ancient relatives vanished long ago, pieces of their story remain hidden inside every cell, invisible, silent, yet still present, over time. A surprisingly rich portrait has begun to emerge. Modern genetic research has revealed that ancient encounters between Homo sapiens and other human species left lasting traces. Many people living today carry inherited fragments passed down from Neanderthals. While Denisovan ancestry remains particularly significant in populations whose distant ancestors lived in Asia and Oceania, history, it seems, is not always buried. Sometimes it walks around inside us, quietly minding its own business. You stare into the flames, their colours shift constantly: orange, gold, deep red, ash white. No two moments look exactly alike, and perhaps humanity itself resembles the fire, always changing, always moving, never entirely separate from what came before, beyond the camp. Unseen animals move through the darkness, crickets sing among the grasses, a fox barks somewhere in the distance, sounding faintly annoyed by existence. The night continues, gentle, unhurried. A rather surprising clue emerged from studies involving human immune systems. Certain genetic variants inherited from ancient populations may have helped modern humans adapt to unfamiliar diseases and environments encountered during migration. Ancient meetings left practical gifts, unexpected gifts, the sort of inheritance no one could have predicted, which is remarkable. Because those ancient people could never have imagined future generations, and yet, through chance and family, they contributed to lives tens of thousands of years beyond their own. There is something deeply touching about that. As the moon climbs higher, silver light spreads across the stream nearby. The water reflects stars and drifting clouds. The air grows cooler. Most conversation around the fire becomes softer. People are preparing for sleep. And in the quiet hours, thoughts often become more reflective. Generations of investigation have revealed that humanity's story is far less straightforward than earlier scientists once imagined. Instead of a single line progressing neatly through time, the evidence points toward overlapping populations, migrations, encounters, and exchanges. A family tree? Certainly. But one whose branches occasionally reached back toward one another. Life rarely respects simple diagrams. Oddly enough, some inherited Neanderthal traits may influence things as ordinary as sensitivity to sunlight, immune responses, and even aspects of sleep patterns, which means that while lying comfortably beneath their blankets, some people may owe part of their sleeping habits to relatives who hunted mammoths. History occasionally enjoys little jokes like that. Nearby, an elder wraps a child more securely in warm hides. Another person places extra branches beside the fire in preparation for the colder hours before dawn. Simple acts, small kindnesses, nothing dramatic. Yet those same gestures have repeated themselves across unimaginable stretches of time, comforting children, sharing warmth, preparing for tomorrow. Certain traditions require no written instructions. The traces left behind offer a rare glimpse into how deeply interconnected ancient populations may have been. DNA evidence continues to reveal episodes of contact that no archaeologist could have guessed from bones alone. Invisible histories, hidden family connections, forgotten encounters. The past contains far more relationships than anyone once suspected. Absolute certainty remains frustratingly out of reach. Scientists continue refining their understanding as new discoveries appear. Some populations may still be unknown. Entire chapters of the story may remain hidden beneath caves, sediments, and landscapes untouched by excavation. The mystery has not disappeared. It has simply become richer, which is perhaps the best kind of mystery. The stars shine brilliantly now, without cities or electric lights. The sky appears endless. The Milky Way stretches overhead like a river of pale dust. Ancient people knew these stars. Neanderthals knew them. Denisovans knew them. Unknown relatives whose names have vanished knew them. And tonight, you know them too. Different worlds, different ages, same sky. Hidden among the evidence lies a delightful detail. Some researchers estimate that if every extinct branch of humanity could somehow gather together, the variety among them would probably appear less dramatic than our popular imagination often suggests. Not monsters, not creatures from strange worlds, just people, different, yet familiar, which makes their disappearance feel all the more poignant, because they were neighbours, cousins, members of a remarkably complicated family. As another quiet day reaches its end, the camp settles fully into silence. Only the fire remains awake. Its soft crackling mixes with the sounds of insects and distant water. The moonlight touches sleeping figures. Breathing becomes slow and steady, peaceful, and while you sit beneath the stars, listening to the night around you, a simple realization settles gently into your thoughts. The ancient relatives whose bones rest beneath caves and hillsides are not entirely absent. Not completely. They remain in fragments, in inherited traits, in shared emotions, in kindness, in curiosity, in the countless ordinary moments that define human life. Their names may be forgotten, their languages lost, their faces mostly vanished, yet traces endure, quiet traces, patient traces, enough to remind you that humanity was never a lonely story. It was always a chorus, many voices, many journeys, many lives, and though most of those voices have faded into silence, their echoes still travel softly through time, right into the present, right into the night. While moonlight touches the river and cool air settles across the grasslands, the camp rests in near silence. Most of the day's voices have faded. Children sleep beneath hide coverings. Only a few adults remain awake beside the fire, adding branches from time to time and staring thoughtfully into the glowing embers. The smell of smoke clings gently to everything. The stream continues its endless song beyond the trees. Above, the stars shine with extraordinary clarity, without walls, without clocks, without electric lights. Night itself feels larger here, and perhaps that is why your thoughts drift toward a final mystery. Not one hidden beneath the earth, not one locked inside ancient DNA, but a mystery that concerns memory itself. Because how much of the ancient world can truly be known, and how much will forever remain hidden? You listen to the quiet crackling of the fire. Its light dances across sleeping faces. A gentle breeze moves through the grass. Somewhere beyond the valley, wolves call into the darkness, not close enough to disturb the camp, just distant reminders that the world remains alive and filled with things unseen. Looking across the evidence as a whole, certain themes become difficult to ignore. Ancient humans cared for one another. They adapted to changing environments. They created tools, passed on knowledge, and formed communities. Those broad patterns appear again and again, yet many details remain frustratingly elusive. Languages vanished, songs disappeared, stories faded, laughter dissolved into silence, entire generations left behind no names, no portraits, no written records. Only traces, tiny traces, and from those traces, modern people attempt something rather extraordinary. They try to remember strangers who lived tens of thousands of years ago. There is something beautiful about that effort, a gesture of curiosity reaching across immense distances. One curious observation involves footprints. Unlike bones, footprints capture moments rather than lifetimes. A person walking beside another, children running, someone pausing, someone carrying weight. For a brief instant, ancient movement became frozen into mud before hardening into stone. And thousands of years later, people would discover those marks and realize that ordinary days leave remarkable memories. You smile softly, because perhaps the owners of those footprints never imagined anyone would care, in fairness. Most people heading to work on a rainy Monday probably do not expect future archaeologists to become overly excited about their shoes either. Time has preserved enough evidence to suggest that many ancient experiences would feel surprisingly familiar. Parents worried about children. People became ill. Friends gathered around fires. Young people learned from older generations. Communities celebrated successful hunts. People mourned losses. Life contained joy. Life contained hardship, just as it does now. And maybe that familiarity explains why these distant relatives feel less like strangers and more like forgotten members of the family. The moon rises higher. Silver light spills across the stream. Insects sing among the grasses. A fox appears briefly near the edge of the trees before disappearing into darkness once again. Everything moves quietly, patiently, as though the world itself is breathing slowly, unexpectedly. The smallest clues prove the most informative. Tiny grains of pollen, fragments of charcoal, microscopic traces of DNA, minute scratches on stone tools, ancient teeth, bits of ash. None of them appear impressive at first glance, yet together they tell stories, not complete stories, not perfect stories, but enough to reveal lives, enough to reveal hopes, enough to reveal relationships, enough to remind you that history rarely survives through grand monuments alone. Sometimes it survives through dust. The picture remains incomplete in several important ways. Experts have become increasingly cautious about drawing firm conclusions from limited evidence. New technologies have overturned earlier assumptions more than once, and future discoveries may well reshape today's understanding. The story continues to evolve, which means that humility remains essential. History has repeatedly taught researchers an amusing lesson every time they become too certain. The past quietly produces another surprise. A broader perspective reveals something equally remarkable. For most of human history, no one knew they were making history. No one announced the arrival of a new species. No one declared the beginning of an era. People simply lived, one day after another, one season after another. And through those countless ordinary moments, entire worlds emerged. There is also a charming detail that often goes unnoticed. Ancient campfires themselves may have preserved memories, not in words, not in books, but through stories spoken aloud, children listening, adults remembering, elders teaching, knowledge passing from voice to voice. Long before libraries existed, memory itself served as a library, and perhaps some stories endured for generations before finally disappearing. Stories no one will ever hear again. Yet perhaps that is acceptable. Not every beautiful thing must last forever. As the night deepens, even the remaining adults beside the fire begin preparing for sleep. Wood settles into glowing coals. The smell of ash becomes softer. Breathing grows slower throughout the camp. The stars continue their patient journey overhead, and beneath that immense sky, you realize something strangely comforting. Mystery is not a failure. Mystery is part of the gift. If every answer were already known, curiosity would disappear, wonder would disappear, the quiet joy of discovery would disappear. Certain mysteries refuse to disappear, and perhaps they should, because unanswered questions encourage each new generation to look again, to listen again, to search again, to imagine again. And so, beneath ancient stars that have watched countless species come and go, you remain beside the fading fire, surrounded by silence, surrounded by memory, surrounded by questions, and somewhere beneath distant hills, inside forgotten caves and untouched valleys, More answers sleep patiently beneath the earth, in no hurry, content to wait, as they have waited for thousands upon thousands of years. As another quiet day reaches its end, the valley rests beneath a sky filled with stars. The air has cooled. Grass bends softly beneath the night breeze. Moonlight glimmers across the stream beyond the trees, and the familiar fire at the centre of the camp burns lower with each passing moment. Its crackling has become quieter now, its warmth gentler. Most of the people around you are asleep. Their breathing rises and falls steadily beneath hide coverings. Children dream, adults rest after another ordinary day, and above them all, the stars continue their patient journey across the heavens. You sit in silence for a while. No urgency, no great event, only the quiet companionship of night. And after following this long story through forgotten ages, mysterious species, ancient encounters, and vanished voices, one final truth settles softly into your thoughts. Humanity was never a single straight line. It was a gathering, a vast family, complicated, messy, unexpected, and profoundly connected. No single discovery provided the answer. Rather, hundreds of small clues gradually accumulated over generations of research. Fossils, tools, genetic evidence, footprints, pigments, campfires, and traces too tiny for ancient people to imagine have slowly revealed a picture richer than anyone once expected. Not complete, but beautiful. And perhaps beauty does not require completeness. The fire pops quietly. Tiny sparks rise and disappear. The smell of wood smoke lingers in the cool air. Far beyond the camp, unseen animals move through forests and grasslands beneath the same moon. Life continues, as it always has. One discovery caused researchers to rethink old assumptions for much of modern history. Extinct human relatives were often imagined as primitive failures. Yet the deeper the evidence was examined, the more familiar they appeared. They loved, they adapted, they cooperated, they cared for one another, they survived harsh climates and changing landscapes. They raised children, they buried their dead, they looked upward and saw the stars in so many ways. They were not strangers, they were kin. And perhaps that realization changes something inside you, not dramatically, not all at once, but quietly. Like dawn arriving over distant hills, looking across thousands of discoveries, certain themes become impossible to ignore. Curiosity, cooperation, kindness, resilience, adaptability. These qualities appear again and again across deep time, not perfection, not superiority, simply persistence, generation after generation, people helping one another, people learning, people remembering, people hoping, and somehow, against impossible odds, that long chain reached the present, reached you. There are still gaps large enough to invite healthy disagreement. Entire species may remain undiscovered. Future technologies may reveal things that would seem miraculous to researchers today. Questions remain, and that is perfectly all right, because mystery has accompanied humanity from the beginning. It sat beside ancient fires. It walked beneath ice age skies. It crossed mountains and rivers, and it remains with us now, not as an enemy, but as a companion. The moon climbs higher. Its pale light washes across sleeping figures. The stream whispers softly. Leaves rustle overhead. The smell of pine and ash fills the cool air. Everything slows, everything softens, and gradually, your thoughts drift away from discoveries and debates, away from fossils and genetics, away from species names and timelines. What remains is something simpler, something quieter, a feeling, a sense that beneath all the differences, beneath all the vanished branches of humanity, there existed a shared experience, warm fires, cold mornings, fear, hope, love, loss, laughter, wonder, Simple things, enduring things, things that no extinction could entirely erase. And now, as the embers pulse softly beneath the ash, the camp sleeps peacefully around you. No one knows they are living inside history. No one realizes that tens of thousands of years later, someone far away will think about them with kindness. They simply rest, trusting the arrival of another morning, trusting the people beside them, trusting life itself. And perhaps that quiet trust is among the oldest inheritances humanity possesses. Eventually, even the last glowing coals begin fading into darkness. The sounds of insects blend with the gentle murmur of water. Clouds drift slowly across the stars. The valley becomes still, and somewhere far beneath mountains, inside caves, beneath ancient sediments and forgotten landscapes, countless secrets continue sleeping peacefully, in no hurry, waiting patiently, content to let future generations discover them when the time is right. For now, though, there is no need to search any further, no need to solve every mystery, no need to know every answer. The night is calm, the fire is warm, the stars are bright, and after a journey stretching across hundreds of thousands of years, it is enough simply to sit quietly beneath the endless sky and appreciate the extraordinary family story that brought you here. And now, the night grows softer still. The valley lies beneath a blanket of silver moonlight. The stream continues its gentle journey through the darkness, just as it has for countless generations. The trees sway quietly in the cool breeze, and somewhere beyond the hills, unseen creatures move peacefully beneath the same stars. Around you, the camp rests. Breathing slows, dreams deepen. The last traces of warmth linger inside the fading ashes. Nothing asks anything more of you. There are no tasks to finish, no mysteries that must be solved tonight. Those ancient questions have waited thousands upon thousands of years. They can wait until morning, for now. It is enough to remember that you belong to a story far older than cities, older than kingdoms, older even than written words. A story carried through endless seasons, through winter winds and summer grasslands, through quiet rivers and distant mountains, through people who never knew your name, yet helped shape the world you inhabit. And perhaps somewhere, in ways too subtle to notice, fragments of forgotten relatives still accompany you, not as shadows, not as ghosts, but as gentle echoes woven into the long fabric of humanity. Above, the stars continue shining with their timeless patience. They watched Neanderthals, they watched Denisovans, they watched the first Homo sapiens gather around small fires, and tonight they watch over you as well. Nothing rushes, nothing demands. The earth turns quietly, the night deepens, and the world settles into stillness. So allow your thoughts to become lighter. Allow the sounds of distant water and rustling leaves to drift softly through your imagination. And as the stars slowly wheel overhead and the final embers surrender their glow, let the ancient world fade peacefully into darkness. Sweet dreams.